One night, two stunning girls were urging a young man to stop pretending and to wake up immediately. The boy was utterly astonished, wondering where these beautiful sisters had suddenly appeared from. For a moment, he thought he might be dreaming. Yet, he couldn't shake the feeling that this was all unfolding in real life. Opening his eyes, he told the beauty that he was already awake and asked her to stop licking him. But as he opened his eyes wider, he was stunned by what he saw and realized it was nothing more than a dream. Suddenly, a thunderous roar echoed, and the young man was terrified by the deafening waves of sound that made him cover his ears. When he finally came back to reality, he found himself face to face with enormous, menacing monsters. He screamed at them to stay away, but the creatures were relentless and refused to obey. Realizing they wouldn't back down, the boys swiftly delivered a powerful kick to one of their heads. This young man's name is Chu Guang, and he's fighting to survive in a post-apocalyptic world. The monsters here are ruthless, and once they spot their prey, they won't let it escape alive. Chu Guang had originally come to the western lands in search of food, or perhaps even scraps, but he never expected to end up in this situation after taking a short rest. By running aimlessly, Chu Guang somehow managed to shake off his pursuers. He considered himself lucky since the two-headed hyena wasn't particularly strong. As he collapsed to the ground, he glanced at a puddle of water and caught his reflection. However, he quickly reminded himself that darkness was falling, and moving through this monster-ridden world at night was far too dangerous. At this point, it would be wisest to return to base, even if it meant going hungry. He ran deep into the abandoned city until he reached an old hospital, where he found the entrance to an asylum labeled 404. These ruins were the bases he had referred to earlier. From the outside, Sanctuary 404 looked like a dilapidated, forgotten shelter. But in reality, the place is packed with all sorts of useful goodies. As soon as he opens the doors, he steps into a completely different world where he feels much more at ease. Before he could fully process his surroundings, a robot came speeding toward him, calling out "Master." This was robot assistant number 777. Guan turned to 7 and asked if he could finally rest for a bit. After all, he had only been gone for half a day. 7 responded politely, reminding the young man that he had already been away for far too long and that there was a task waiting for him to complete. 7 is a robot assistant who resides in the base. However, Guan is the one in charge of managing this place. It belongs to him, and it serves as a relatively safe haven in this desolate wasteland. There are also supplies stocked here. Though not abundant, they're enough to last for a while. Sitting down at his computer, Guan remarked that, much like an administrator, he has a set of responsibilities to fulfill. One of these duties is to use Earth's internet to recruit individuals known as players to this world. Reclaiming territory depends on this very process. After much thought about the challenges ahead, Guan reflected that it had been 5 months since he moved here. This job, he realized, was perfect for him. Without wasting any more time, he began implementing a plan to promote a game called Onion Growth in the Badlands Online. Engaging in conversations with people from the other world, he often posed a question. Could they believe there was a game so realistic it was indistinguishable from real life? Long exchanges with strangers had always been challenging for him. Sitting on the floor of the men's dormitory, a guy at his computer muttered that this light person must have spent way too much time gaming. Still, Guan couldn't help but think that if such technology truly existed, the military would have been the first to test it. At one point, he was utterly stunned when his conversation partner asked if he'd like to try playing the game themselves, attaching a link to what seemed like an incredible game at the bottom of the message. Back in the wasteland, inside Shelter 404, Guan was hard at work attracting new players. He sent out a voice message stating that he had shared a link, and anyone interested was welcome to give it a shot. As readers can observe, he's now attempting to lure players from Hua country into this world. But this game even had pre-orders, and the hyper-realistic Wasteland Online only managed to attract 11 participants. Guan took note of this and remarked that the number of applicants was sufficient to complete his assignment. Now, as the administrator of the game, he was entitled to a reward. The system notified him that he had successfully completed his mission and granted him 5 times the bonus points. Seeing the notification on his monitor, Guan muttered to himself that he had finally made it, 5 months after arriving here. But 5 months ago, back on Earth, he was just an ordinary sales manager. That day, he had successfully closed a major deal, so he decided to celebrate by having a few drinks after finishing work. However, shortly after drinking, he experienced a sudden, sharp tightness in his chest, followed by an intense high-pitched sound, and then his consciousness slipped away. That night, he endured a pain so excruciating and overwhelming that it felt like his eyes were shrinking in their sockets. When he opened his eyes again, he found himself in this post-apocalyptic world. At first, he thought it was some kind of prank, assuming someone had tossed him onto a movie set to film whatever was happening. Desperate to escape, he began running, hoping to find a way out of this nightmare. But the place was far larger than he had anticipated. What frightened him even more was the realization that he had become an entirely different person. In that moment, he heard the same sound again, the one he had heard just before losing consciousness. And then, something even more bizarre occurred. He received a system alert greeting him as a scavenger in this game. After the alert appeared, Guan was completely baffled. He had no idea what kind of world he was in or why he had been labeled a scavenger. At that moment, his first instinct was to call the police. But that's when he realized he had lost not only his phone, but everything else he had on him. In this state of confusion, he aimlessly wandered through the wasteland for an entire day. Hunger began to gnaw at him, and he clutched his stomach in pain. But he had no choice but to accept the harsh reality of his situation. His priority now was to find something to eat. To his surprise, he stumbled upon a human settlement. He arrived at BEP Camp, a street where survivors resided. Guan's goal was simple: find food, and perhaps, along the way, he could learn more about this strange new world. Suddenly, someone barked an order at him, telling him not to move, or he'd end up in the other world. But first, he had to answer one question. From which asylum did he come? At that moment, fear gripped Guan. The language sounded alien to him, though perhaps it was because he had been abruptly thrown into this place. Yet, despite the strangeness, he could not only understand it, but also speak it fluently. Behind him stood Old Man Walter, who pressed a shotgun firmly against the boy's head. Trying to stay calm, Guan mockingly remarked to the old man, suggesting they take their time since he was just passing through. But Walter was far from merciful. After hearing these words, he pulled the trigger. The shot narrowly missed the boy's head. Moments later, Guan opened his eyes to see a bear lying in front of him, the very one Walter had shot. Walter lit his sacred pipe and muttered, "The wasteland is no place for children to play around." Then he added sternly, "Don't let me catch you wandering here unarmed again. Otherwise, he'd become nothing more than fodder for the monsters." Guan listened intently and thanked Walter for the advice. Before long, he came to realize that old Walter had been right. After 5 months of survival, Guan had grown far more aware of the harsh realities of this world. The year was 2129 in a parallel world. 211 years ago, a devastating war had nearly wiped out humanity entirely. From that point onward, the post-apocalyptic era began. In the wastelands, one had to be wary not only of countless mutated animals, but also of marauders. In the year 211 of the Wasteland's reckoning, 5 months after his arrival, Guan realized he had been here long enough to grasp the fundamentals of this world. But there was still something he couldn't quite comprehend. As he passed by the spot where he had first appeared in this world, he kept hearing that same eerie sound. When he arrived at the abandoned hospital, Guan noticed the sound growing louder and louder. He realized this was the place he needed to investigate. The sound that haunted him seemed to be coming from within. Now, he had no choice but to uncover the truth behind it all. As he walked further, the sound became even clearer, confirming he was on the right track. He hadn't expected to discover such a massive room hidden beneath the hospital. Unfortunately, it appeared to hold nothing useful. But upon entering the chamber, he was utterly astonished. To his disbelief, he had stumbled upon a concealed hiding place. and the sound was emanating from inside. As a bright, blinding light shone before him, he felt an inexplicable urge, as if the space itself was instructing him to activate something. Without hesitation, Guan placed his palm on the door. To his surprise, his fingerprints matched perfectly, triggering the mechanism to open the secret entrance. When the doors slid open in front of him, he was left speechless. But then, a second door opened, and through the thick smoke, he saw glowing eyes that moved with intent. He was scared and hoped that he hadn't unleashed some boss monster. But he soon calmed down when he saw the robot in front of him. Seven told the guy that no, and it's Guan the boss. He's just his little assistant, whose serial number is 777. Seven rejoiced and showed the gentleman that he had finally arrived, and he congratulates him, for he has become the administrator of Asylum 404. Guan asked in surprise, "Is he an administrator?" The system immediately appeared in front of him and showed that he was an admin. The guy asked, did he have full control of this place now? The system showed him that he was a scavenger who had leveled up to game administrator. Seven replied to the gentleman that everything was correct, and he will try his best to help the esteemed administrator with his tasks. Guan didn't understand and asked, what other task? Seven replied that yes. He must use the Earth's internet to summon a group of players to help restore the wasteland. And once he completes the task, he and the players will receive a reward that will help him level up. An idea occurred to Guan, and he asked if he could contact the land from here. Seven replied that of course. And not only can the asylum connect to a parallel world, Earth, it even has its own official website. All players who register for the game will be assigned a number, and their data will be entered into the asylum's resident list. And the administrator also has the right to decide who to let join the game. Due to the capabilities of the system, game equipment will be sent to the players' homes. One of the players, who was a girl, was trying very hard to get into the game, and one night she saw a bright light in which she moved. Guan soon realized that as long as they were wearing their game helmets, they could communicate with one of the clones available in the shelter. Guan rejoiced and realized that there was always a way out, and he finally found a loophole. Guan told the robot that calling him by a Siri number was too rude. From now on, he would call him Seventh. The Seventh heard these words and shouted that he had a name. He could not stop running and ran in different directions. Guan had never seen anything like this before and asked the seventh man what was happening to him. Was there a failure in the system? He thought. The robot says he is now the seventh, and he's asking the esteemed administrator to take care of him. Guan looked at him for a few more minutes and said, Seventh like a little child. Although his assistant is a bit silly, but the ability to summon players and gather them like a harvest is too good. Not only can he level up and get stronger, but he can also bond with the Earth. But who knows, maybe one day he can go home. Suddenly, the system appeared in front of his face, and Guan saw that it had already given him a task. So he decided to start recruiting players. On planet Earth, in a men's dormitory, guy sat at his computer and asked, does a game like this really exist? Guan saw that after his arrival in office, his players were discussing the Wasteland online game at full speed. A guy named Wei from the men's dormitory was looking at all of this and was thinking of going into full immersion. But he wondered how realistic the game would actually turn out to be. Wei asked his interlocutor, what century are they living in? How can he promote his game with such second-rate advertising? He won't be able to attract any players at all. At this time, Guan was typing furiously while sitting at the computer in shelter number 404. But he didn't agonize long and sent the new player a link to the game. Wei was greatly surprised to see the link, and although he doesn't believe him, but what if such a game really exists, he thought. But then all the women and wives he created in Skyrim using over 200 mods would be real. Entering his imagination, he saw the girls surrounding him. One of them called him husband and asked if he was tired, but maybe he would let her give him a massage. Wei rethought all this and said that as a university student who believes in learning, he should use a scientific approach to explore this new technology. Pressing the game key's intro to the game, he shouted that he was all in. And now it remains for him to see how realistic this game is. In the morning, Wei went to the university canteen, and taking a portion of food in front of him, he gorged himself and said that this spicy chicken was so delicious. After filling his belly with enough food, he walked out of the dining hall like a sack. He said, "Now we could go to the dorm." But when he opened the door to his room, he was surprised to see that a package had come to him. His friend asked him, what did he buy? Why is the box so huge? Wei was surprised and replied that he hadn't ordered anything and asked who had brought it into the room. The roommate replied that he hadn't seen anything. Wei thought that was very suspicious. But when he opened the box, he saw that an iron helmet had been brought to him. He started shouting with joy that it was gaming equipment. Unsuspecting of what this gaming helmet was capable of, he decided to see if it worked. Opening his eyes, he saw a bright light in front of him in which he fell completely with his body. He thought that this game had started. His imagination took over, and he began to hear the girls surround him. He said his hyper-realistic, fully immersive game. He said with joy on his face that he was going to his own game. And soon he would have his own harem too. Once in space, he figured that if this game was realistic, then that meant the perks must be as well. But in a moment, everything changed from what he saw. He saw that there were 72 hours left until the game was launched. After that, he started yelling that he wanted to play right now. He asked why he had to endure waiting for 3 days when he was already without pants. The neighbor was very frightened after his screams and told Wei that he was crazy and tell him to stop shouting in the middle of the night. But the neighbor got very curious about the huge helmet and asked him where he bought it, but Wei asked him not to touch his helmet. But Guan had been sitting in front of his computer the whole time, looking for new players for him to bring into the real world. But suddenly he got a voicemail. Guan said it's a corporate secret, he can't divulge it. But they are friends, so he would try to knock out 4 game helmets for them. But people were only loaned to them, and so no need to break and lose them, or he'll get knocked on the cap. Guan went on to say that the helmet synchronizes with the wearer. Synchronization can only be with one user. You can only create one account too. Guan rejoiced that he had made the right decision in texting those he used to hang out with. But suddenly he remembered that after his grandfather's death, he had cut all ties with his parents, and he had been gone for 5 months. Everyone on Earth had already decided that he was dead, and now he thought he'd have to rely on himself and go back to his job. He told Seven that their website was too primitive. Can the Seventh add a forum, wiki pages, and a media content upload field to it? Seven replied to the gentleman that, of course, let him order it. The initial construction phase requires a huge amount of manual labor, so you need to get as many male players involved as possible. And that's why the main page of the site should attract the attention of guys. Besides, the purpose of the site is not only to tell about the game, but also to motivate to play it through interaction with users. A bot with a female body will ask new players if they want to play with her in Wasteland Online. And then when guys see something like Wei, they'll say they really want to play with her. Suddenly, Guan said that he needed to prepare for the launch of the game. Let him try to improve the site in the next 3 days. Seven responded to the order, which will be carried out. But Seven was curious and asked the gentleman why he only sent 4 helmets. Weren't there 11 players who had registered? But even if he took them all in, they would only take up 10% of the clone tanks in Area B1. Guan replied that they didn't have enough supplies right now. Fewer people, less hungry mouths. And on top of that, even the admin's ability to make the players put on helmets and work for it. And as they say, you can't be too hasty. They need to start by nurturing the 4 of them. Seven said it made sense. There are enough of these players to complete the system's mission. And there's his reward, and he can have it. The system showed him that the player recruitment mission had been completed, and he is rewarded with a nanocarbon body armor. Guan listened and thought it sounded like something high-tech, and he pressed the button to get the reward. After taking it, he didn't even expect how the body armor moved into his body. And this item is put on automatically. Guan read the description of this reward and saw that he would now be much safer when he gathered to escape from here. But suddenly the 7th told the receptionist that the vest wasn't as cool as the random box that awaited him, and different level boxes give different rewards. The regular box gives food, the medium level box gives medicine, and the last one gives weapons. Guan got curious and asked if he should spend 5 of his points on regular boxes or save up 100 and get a weapon. But suddenly 7 told the gentleman that he had a new assignment. It's already in his logbook, and don't forget to check it. Opening the admin log, he was shocked to see that the hallowed cookies were worth 100 points. 7 replied, as he would explain it to him. Active matter can be considered a method of resurrection. It is used to create clones of players when they die. Suddenly Guan said he had made up his mind and would use the reward for this task to open the weapons box, and ordered the 7th to use all his points to open the regular boxes. 7 replied that he understood the order and opened a plain box for the gentleman. Guan looked at the open cabinet and asked, "Is this the whole drop?" At this time, there were lollipops, cookies, and sweets on his table. Guan took a candy in his hand and asked if it was too little. Does he look like a kid who would be happy about that? He only got a few candies, and one item was missing. But a small piece of paper caught his eye. He picked it up and wondered what it was. But he hoped it wasn't a 5th item. He read a message that asked the players if there were creatures in this world more suitable for exploitation than the players. Guan realized that the message was written in the language of this world, and it was good that in the last 5 months he had learned to read and write it. He read all this, and he got mad and squeezed the paper and said it was a passphrase. So he'd just stolen one of his items. 7 saw this and asked him to calm down. Guan realized that if one thought hard enough, someone was able to develop such a technology in an era of near extermination of humanity. And disguising this device as a game was truly a genius decision. But genius, that's not enough to describe the first administrator. Guan asked the 7th if he knew the first master. The 7th replied that he did not know him. His program was started when he entered the shelter. Guan told him that everything was fine and not to let him load himself up. But since he was the administrator, there should be at least some information about him in the asylum's database. 7 listened to everything and replied to the gentleman that he would try to look it up. He showed the records he had found about the previous administrator. It has been said that in that war, both sides not only sent their enemy to the grave, but also fell into it themselves. After the end of the war in 2129, humanity entered a new era called the Wasteland Era. 7 said that according to records, the nuclear winter that came after these events wiped out almost all traces of human civilization. But there is no information about the first administrator. It was probably deleted. Guang thought for a moment and said that since that was the case, they would postpone it for now. The players will arrive in 3 days, and he's going to make some preparations and visit the recycling center. Opening the cupboard, he threw away the crumpled paper and realized that the important issue for him now was the lack of food and water. Guan told the robot to behave and wait for him. 7 asked the master when he would be back. Guan replied that not until tomorrow evening, the deadline the end of the 3rd day. At this point, he decided to go to the survivors' camp to get supplies. 8 a.m. He went out into the city and realized that the road from the shelter to Bet Street was full of dangers. Not even a mouse could get past those 2-headed hyenas. But suddenly the hyenas saw the prey before them and turned sinister and bloodthirsty. Guan immediately sensed the danger and realized that he had been discovered, so he decided to run away. On his way to the camp, he came across 2-headed hyenas. According to the survivors, they had mutated as a result of exposure to gamma radiation. After that, their combat power only decreased. Guang believed and realized that as long as he had a weapon, even fighting 2 at once was not a big problem. He found a weapon beneath him and taking it in his hands, said he could tag them, but there was no need to fight before he was discovered. But while these mutants are the main threat to the survivors, there are both strong and weak individuals among them. Compared to them, creatures like creepers and other monsters mutated beyond recognition are natural-born killers. But 2-headed hyenas are not very strong, but they are quite clever. They often send 1 or 2 members of the pack on a scouting mission. Like mutant cockroaches, if you see one in moment's notice, you can be sure that there are countless of them hiding in the dark. And one wrong move, and he's going to be screwed. Most of the time, he's out of his life. Upon arriving at the survivor camp on Bet Guan Street, he decided that he needed to go to the recycling center first to get some chips, and then he would use it to buy supplies, Otherwise, the players would starve to death. But having bought the supplies, he put them on the scales, which never showed the right result. The owner of the recycling center, Old Charlie, counted it all up and told the guy that it came out to a total of 3 chips. The batteries are not bad, but the quality of the glue is mediocre, so we'll only take it for half price. Guan accepted everything as it was, because something is better than nothing. But suddenly, Old Charlie asked the lad if he wished to purchase anything. There's some new merchandise from Jusher. Guan asked, "Is there a gun?" Charlie laughed and replied that he didn't keep one of those. Even if he had, he couldn't afford it. But he's got food and fuel. He recommends that the guys stock up before winter comes and the prices go up. Guan asked in surprise, "Are the cold weather coming?" Charlie answered the young man that he had arrived only 5 months ago, so he must not have experienced winter yet. But around this time of year, temperatures start to drop. Apparently, winter will come a little earlier this year. Perhaps the first snow will fall in October. Guan remembered that the mutants in the wastelands were beginning to prepare more actively for the cold months that followed. And in winter, he'll never be able to tell if a valuable metal is hidden under a pile of snow or if a mutant rat with sharp fangs is lurking. And once it snows, even the traveling merchants will stop coming here. The people who tried to survive in the winter month were never happy about it. But on one such day, 2 boys were caught in a blizzard. The older one asked the younger one to hang on. After all, they would finish the last delivery and wouldn't be out until spring. In winter, even if he finds something valuable, he can only hide it at home and wait for spring to come when trade resumes. Charlie said that of course the boy could take a chance and go to the town of Jusher, 10 kilometers away. The markets there are open even in the middle of winter. Guan saw that Old Charlie was rambling again, but thanks to him, he was able to quickly understand how the world worked. He used to live in another sanctuary, but one day he was caught and made a slave and put up for auction, where he was bought by the head of the camp. And then Charlie was assigned to deal with the scavengers. If it hadn't been for the chaos in the world, I'm sure he would have become an engineer, a doctor, or a scientist like his ancestors, instead of a simple archivist. Guan listened to everything and turned around and said he had to go. Charlie wished him to be careful and to come to him if he found anything worthwhile. Guan always thought that maybe Charlie was looking out for him because he thought he was also a survivor from another asylum. Arriving at his house, he realized that there was hardly anything to trade for 3 chips. And now he'd better count how much he had left. When Guan opened his stash, he counted and said that the total would be 50 chips. And that was the fortune of an entire family. But that was barely enough for the initial stages of building the shelter. First of all, you need to rebuild the area around the shelter. You need to buy some tools. And then players can gather materials nearby and repair the walls of the hospital with clay and stones. And because it's a hyper-realistic game, they'll start at the lowest levels. In addition to tools, they also need food. But once the clone synchronizes with the player, it becomes a living being that needs to feed to replenish energy. He also realized that if the players had nothing to eat, they might resort to extreme measures, and then control would be lost. The disciple will turn to him and say he is so hungry, and let him see how gaunt he is, how he can bully him like that. And now Guan realized that he needed enough food to feed 5 people for a whole week. But even if you only eat twice a day and only eat 1 wheat pie at a time, it still comes out to 70 chips. But since they are expendable to him, there is no need to feed them such good food. Suddenly, it occurred to Guan that they would be eating green wheat from a neighboring farm. 3 chips could buy 1 kilogram, and 5 kilograms were enough to feed 1 person for 2 weeks. He remembered that green wheat is used to make wheat pies. And so but first he would visit the processing center. He would think about the rest at a more appropriate time. But suddenly, closing the door behind him, he turned around and was startled to see the girl in front of him. The girl told her older brother that she was not on purpose. Guang remembered that this girl's name was Xiaou. She seems to be the youngest daughter of the Yu family. Xiaou told her brother that there were some sounds coming from his house. She thought someone was trying to steal from him, so she came to look. Guang thought for a moment and thanked her for being so brave. Xiaou said no problem. In the future, she could look after the house in his absence. She has nothing to do, at her place anyway. Guang replied that children shouldn't get too close to strangers. If she met a bad person, things could end badly. The girl got angry and said loudly that Xiaou was not a child. Her brother said that she was old enough to get married. And Brother Guang is not a bad person either. The last time she was hungry, he fed her soup. And Guan realized that from that moment on, she had been hanging around his house. Guang thought about it and told her not to be angry and offered her the lollipop he got from the box. Xiaou was surprised and asked her brother if she could really eat it. Guang asked her not to tell others that she got it from him, or else he wouldn't give it to her again. Xiaou thanked her brother and said she had never eaten such a thing. She took a lollipop in her mouth and asked why she couldn't take a bite. Guan held out his hand and replied that he would help her. Pulling out a candy wrapper, he held it out to her and told her to try it. Guan felt sorry for her and remembered that in his world, a child her age would still be in school. But suddenly he saw her start to lick the candy with her tongue and her eyes sewed. She felt that the candy was very tasty. Xiaou deep in her heart rejoiced and said that it was very sweet. Guang replied that it was called Chupa Chups and was very happy that she liked it. Suddenly, Xiaou started laughing and said that her big brother could smile too, and continued eating the candy. She was a very kind girl and loved to share with the people around her. She never felt sorry, and holding out the candy told her brother to try it too. Guanu was sick of it all, and covering her face with his hat told her to stop fooling around and have her watch the house while he was away. Xiaou said that she was not fooling around and was always serious. But when she looked up, she saw that her brother was gone and asked where he had gone. In her wake, she shouted to her brother not to worry, and she would take very good care of his shelter. Arriving at the headquarters, Guang said that 3 days had passed. The players should have arrived by now. His words proved to be true. The players were out at the time and had their helmets on. Wei found himself in a shell and gained the ability of metasensitivity. He opened his eyes after he had passed out for a long time. Gathered in one place, player who received physical power could not believe it and asked, "Are they really in the game?" And now he could actually do what he wanted to do. The next player got the dexterity ability and was surprised to say that he didn't expect the actual gender to be automatically selected. He wanted to choose a female character. One of the group got their intelligence abilities and said he had no idea the game would turn out to be so real. Gao couldn't believe it and said it was as if they were in a completely different world with the help of a game helmet. Wei also shouted that everything was right. He could even feel his underwear slowly drying up. Suddenly, the doors in front of them slowly opened, and he said that someone was coming. Guan came out and said that the war is over, but their world is mutilated beyond recognition, and so they need their help to rebuild their homeland. Guan introduced himself and said that he was the administrator of this place, and the code name was Dawn. And this is his assistant, Seven. If they have any questions, they can contact him. Seven said hello to the new students and asked them if they could take care of him. The system immediately told the administrator that 4 players had just entered the game, and they were shocked and in awe because of his appearance. One thought it was perfect for him, and now he had one. The disciples began to marvel and said that the administrator looked like a real person. They started loading him up with the question, what's their mission, and how do they get out of the game? Also, can they change the gender in the character settings? Guan told them to calm down, and if they wished to leave, to just let them enter back into the pods. Their mission now was to be quiet and memorize all the rules from this manual. After giving them a guide for the residents of the shelter, they headed into the forest. Wei suddenly said that this NPC was more like a game master. It even had the ability to ban the player from logging in. Tima thought at that moment and replied that he was someone who shouldn't be annoyed. We need to be more careful from now on. Horsey suddenly said that Brother Guang had gotten these helmets especially for them through his connections. It would be too wasteful if they were banned. But suddenly, Guan turned around and said, "It has been over 200 years since the end of the Great War. The fact that they are standing here means that they are more fortunate than 20 billion people. And now they must embrace the new reality and fulfill the oath they made under the banner of the Union of Humanity, and invited them to reclaim the wasteland and build their home anew. Guang said they're now on the northern outskirts of Qingchuan City, far from the area hit by nuclear warheads, so they don't have to worry about radiation exposure. And their first mission is to take an axe and gather firewood. Winter is coming, and they need to stock up on enough fuel to survive it. And they also need to renovate the hospital building so they can have an outpost here in the wasteland. The disciples picked up their axes and shouted that they would rebuild the wasteland. They would rebuild their home. In the end, Guan told them not to go far away. But if they see monsters, they don't need to engage them, and they should just quietly retreat. Seven asked the gentleman if they would really be okay. Guan replied that that's why he wanted him to watch them, and have him stand by the window on the third floor of the hospital and watch from there, and have them report to him immediately if they encounter danger or go too far away. He will distribute the rewards in the control room in the meantime. Seven replied to the gentleman that he could rely on him. But there's a small problem. He doesn't have the legs to climb the stairs. Guang said he would carry him up there. After getting to where Tima got really tired and said that it wasn't fair. Why is Wei so strong? As if he had trained before and he was tired while he understood the axe. The guy asked, so what if he's a jock? His body is also stronger in the game than in real life. But the guy's imagination was very chic. He was constantly surrounded by girls who just smiled when they saw him. Gal at the time said that their Persians likely have different characteristics. According to the backstory of the game, there could be two reasons why they're different. They are actually ancient humans who have been put into cryogenic sleep to wait out the war, or they've been artificially created by technology. He's leaning more toward the latter. And in that case, if they die, they can revive them by using their DNA to create other clones. And he hopes the developers will add game mechanics along the lines of DNA, pooling, and class systems. And so players will be able to develop in different ways. This will not only give them a certain degree of freedom, but also enrich the gameplay. But suddenly Wei asked the guys, pointing his finger to the dark side, as they think if they keep going in the same direction, could this happen? In his imagination, he only thought of girls, and asked the boys if they could meet the elfies that lived in the forest. Horse replied that the game takes place 200 years after the fallout. He remembers watching the movie Return to Chernobyl. If it's anything like here, he doubts they'll see elves, but they might meet mutants or zombies. Tima asked him, did he forget what the administrator told them about the distance from the hospital? Does he want to be banned? Besides, they only have one axe. If they encounter a monster, it can destroy the entire Timu. Wei replied that he wouldn't do anything stupid and shouldn't worry. Wei remembered that the administrator's orders were above all the inhabitants of the shelter must obey them unconditionally. Wei proceeded to chop wood and said that he was just an NPC. Why should he listen to him? But he got this wonderful game for free thanks to his brother. No need to cause trouble. But suddenly his pupils suddenly shrank, and the axe from his hands fell to the ground. He thought, what was that? And why did he suddenly feel uneasy? Suddenly, there was an explosion, and Wei was very close that he was even thrown back a few meters. Wei was thinking at this point, and didn't realize what was even going on. After all, he had just almost been killed. But when he got a good look, he started screaming that it was a monster, and crying out in fear for help. Wei suddenly asked the monster, is it chasing him again? The blackbird, his great ancestor. Couldn't he be hunting someone else? Seven came down to the third floor afterward and yelled that they were in big trouble. The system also showed that the players had logged in. The main mission was completed and one active matter extractor had been obtained. Guan looked everything over carefully and, holding the instruction manual in his hand, said, meaning this thing is the active matter extractor. And according to the manual he'd read, even monsters could be used. So he decided to put it off for now. Much more importantly, he would now be able to obtain materials to create clones. Suddenly, Seven came in and told the gentleman that they had a problem. A huge bird had attacked the players north of the hospital. Guan thought with surprise, a huge bird. In the forest north of the hospital, the bird was circling above the disciples. Wei was frightened and said that he had laid such bricks. But Gal at that moment began to praise his brother for his cool dodge. But Tima was not surprised and said that the thing looked like a raven. Gal replied that it must be one of those called mutants. Wei asked his brother how he figured that out. Gao replied that the official website said that mutants were creatures exposed to gamma rays. Wei asked with surprise, the website had that too? Wasn't there just a registration button? Gao asked, the new sections were added only yesterday. Didn't he see it? Tima looked at all the monsters that were presented in front of him. Wei shouted that they would talk about it later. They needed to find a way to deal with that raven. But Horsey told the boys not to be afraid. If the enemy did not attack, they would not make any unnecessary movements. But Tima stood to the last, and turning his head, he saw that the others had fled already and he was alone. Tima asked, what are these people anyway? They're not a team now, just cowards and traitors. Suddenly, someone attacked the raven that was flying above the boys. Tima asked who threw the stone. The boys replied that it wasn't them. The raven became even more furious after that, and his eyes turned red. Guan was tossing the stone in his hands at this moment and picked up the moment and threw it directly at the monster. But the raven dodged this attack and immediately headed to attack directly at Guan. Guan was not afraid and said that animals are animals. And even if their heads are bigger, they won't become smarter than humans. Guan picked up his weapon and picked up his momentum and stuck the iron pipe right into the monster's head. The students were sitting in the bushes at this time and watching from the sidelines. They thought, isn't the teacher too strong? Tima said the admin is incredibly cool, and their admin can kill a mutant. Of course he's stronger than some critter. But in the evening they came home and started roasting the mutant falcon. Horsey asked, is this raven really safe to eat? Guan replied that they cooked it, so it should be fine. He would tell them if there was anything that couldn't be eaten. And it's not a crow, it's a falcon. Tima asked with surprise, falcon? Do they grow that big? Is it really because of the radiation? Gao replied that it's not just that. There are also viruses, bacteria, other biological weapons, and other factors that have made animals what they are today. Guan said mutants are one of the possible threats they have to face. In some cases, humans are more dangerous than monsters. And he sure wishes there was salt. It would have been much tastier, but it would be difficult to find it in a city as far away as Qingchuan. Guang told his disciples that he would cook soon. They would not eat such a thing every day in the wastelands. Wei asked, they wouldn't be able to devour it in one sitting, would they? But Tima suggested that they just put the leftovers in the refrigerator. Guan said that they should know that only the head of the survivor camp has something like a refrigerator in the castle. The students were shocked by this and asked, what other chapter? Castle? Wei immediately imagined being greeted by the girls in his castle. And they immediately asked him if he wanted to take a bath, eat, or go to bed. And the other girls told the chapter that they would warm his bed. Wei was greatly pleased and replied that then he would not hold back. Suddenly Horsey asked the receptionist how much firewood they needed to collect, but the other guys were trying to bring Wei to her senses. Guang replied that as much as possible, and he could see that the disciples were very different from him. They could leave at any time. Soon they would have no motivation left to survive here. And now he needs them to keep working, so he needs to reward them. Guan thought about it and said, how about this? If a stick as thick as his arm, every meter would be worth 1 point. If it was as thick as his thigh, it would be worth 2. And the bonus points could be exchanged for a reward. And for example, a fried thigh would be worth 50 points, 2 wings 80. Wei immediately said that he suddenly felt a surge of strength. The others said the same thing. But Horsey replied that there wasn't much time left before lunch, so he would go to and cut down a couple more trees. And all at once they all ran to complete the task. In the evening, the disciples were already completely powerless and barely made it home. Guan said that he thanked them for their hard work. Together, they earned a total of 2,000 bonus points. Player Horsey earned over 800 points. He got very excited and shouted that it was too easy for him. Sometimes he helps drag bricks around in his factory. Gao and Wei earned more than 400 points. The boys rejoiced and thanked each other. And Tima's player scored 300 points. Tima said that this game is too ruthless. His body is as weak as in real life. Guan was surprised to see that they had done better than he had expected. And it was lucky to have a roasted falcon on hand to make them start complaining. If he gave them 2 candy bars after they cut down 100 trees, the next thing you know, they'd be trying to cut him down. Guan approached them and told them that they could view their current bonus points on the website. They can exchange them for items and also buy resurrection coins. Also, revival takes 3 days. Course asked, are there so few things you can buy with bonus points? Wei replied that it's probably closed beta. Obviously, there's not a lot of content yet. But Gao said we need to take advantage of that and get more points early. By the time the game is officially released, there will be more opportunities to spend points. Guan realized that he originally wanted to give them chips as a reward, but he didn't have much of them himself. And on top of that, the players are not fallen, so can't understand the language here. And it looks like he needs to create a translator to solve that problem. Suddenly, Tima told the administrator that he had noticed that there was no electricity in their outpost. Why don't they put in a generator? Guan replied that because he was the only one. Maybe one of them is knowledgeable in this field or in electrical engineering, and if they can solve this problem, he will give them a special reward. Tima, hearing these words, immediately pulled down a bit of his glasses and looked. Wei decided to appear smart and asked, couldn't they just get an extension cord? Guan replied that they didn't have one that long, and the electricity in the shelter is not unlimited. In the long run, it's impossible. It can also lead to much bigger problems. In the evening, Guang said that it was quite late. It was time for them to go back. But he realized that although it wasn't dark yet, but in the real world, a new day would soon dawn. Going home, Horsey said that time flies by when you play the game. Tima said it was because the game was too realistic. But Wei got excited and informed the others that he didn't want to go back to the pod and log out. But Gao said that on the contrary, he really wanted to unlog. Guan came to the capsule room and realized that he needed to find players from a different time zone or those who didn't have to go to work in the morning. Otherwise, it would be difficult to defend the outpost. Seven suddenly turned to the multi-hyphenate administrator and said that the physical condition of the clones had been updated. Would he like to take a look? Guan asked, is there a report on this? Seven replied, that of course there was. Every time a player logs out using the capsule, it automatically scans the clone, and then extracts a few stem cells and records the genetic sequences. It stores them for backup and to check their progress. Guan asked, what does he mean by genetic sequence? Can clones be improved? Seven replied that the biological information of the clones used by the players is synthesized from different DNA sequences. For example, clones with more developed physical strength will naturally be stronger than others, and it would be easier for them to increase their strength. Guan replied that it was no wonder why Horse was stronger than the others. Seven went on to say that the progress of genetic development depends on the degree of dominance of particular genes in the DNA. It is usually expressed as a percentage. For example, if progress in development reaches 100%, the performance of a living organism will approach the limit of genetic development and reach perfection. But this is practically impossible. And so far, progress on the 4 gene sequences they activated is close to 0. And according to research, as long as they stimulate their survival instincts and train their bodies, they can increase that value. And Guan now realized that this archer could level up, and on top of that, they have innate talents. In the future, one would need to train them in a certain area. On the morning of the Jinling University professor's dormitory, Professor Yin Feng came to his senses and removed his helmet from his head. Feng decided that he needed to ask Professor Wang about the electric generator during lunch. In the real world at the university, students were in the canteen shouting, asking why the queue was moving so slowly, and at this rate, they would starve to death. The girls were very surprised to see Professor Wang. They said that he was really handsome and looked quite young. They couldn't even believe that he was already 30 years old. Professor Wang sat down at the table and said hello to the students, and they should go out to lunch. A hunger strike would do no good. The girls were already overjoyed by his voice and shouted to the professor that right now they were going out to eat. The girls were over the moon because Professor Wang is so caring, and they wish they could chat with him longer. Age is just a number. If he's handsome, it's okay. Wang listened to Feng's question and asked in response, is he doing research? Feng closed the book and replied that he had recently read a story about a post-apocalyptic world. Wang wasn't surprised and asked what of it. Feng replied that he wanted to find out if something like the apocalypse really happened, how would the survivors extract electricity? Wang told the professor to just not tell him that this was what he wanted to talk about. Feng replied exactly what it was. Ben told him not to take such stories seriously, unless he had been to such a world. Feng saw Professor Wang's gaze and thought, how did he know? Weren't there 4 people invited to the beta version of the game? Ben told him not to be so serious. He was just joking around with him, after all. Feng accepted it and was a little scared. But even from the looks of it, he doesn't play Wasteland online. Wang thought for a moment and said that he usually read cultivation novels, so he didn't know much about the post-apocalyptic world. Could he briefly tell the plot? Feng replied that the events unfolded 200 years after the nuclear disaster. Wang said solving his problem is not easy. Any unprotected electrical equipment is likely to be damaged by electromagnetic pulses from nuclear explosions. And the more complex the device, the less likely it was to survive. Feng asked, what about private generators in restaurants and residential neighborhoods? Shouldn't they be difficult to use? Wang replied that even if the parts hadn't deteriorated and rusted in 200 years, they would have been taken out long ago. And on top of that, there's the fuel problem. These generators need gasoline. It's unlikely that there will be any left. But perhaps there is a way after all. Feng was surprised and immediately asked him if he could tell him. Wang said there is a recyclable generator in every vehicle. If you fix it and get it to spin the rotor, it can produce a steady current of 12 volts. This should be sufficient for something that does not require a lot of power generation, such as lighting. And if he could find an inverter, there would be no problem converting DC to AC with 240 volts. But Wang thought, why take the short story so seriously? He had heard people say that the members of the physics department were a bit strange, especially the robot Professor Yanfeng, who never laughs. Wang suddenly stood up and said that he still had a class in the afternoon. If there was anything he didn't understand, he could come and ask him. The girls surrounded the professor and said they had a lot of questions too. Wang apologized and replied that he had a class. Why don't they ask Professor Feng? But the girls surrounded him and asked him if he could help them a little bit, and they would help him to clean up, so maybe he could teach them too. Feng was thinking at this moment that later when he logged into the game, he would need to ask the administrator where he could find the cars. But suddenly his phone rang and he thought, why is it vibrating? But let them not say that more information about the game came out. Feng opened his phone and said that it was Tima writing about his experiences. And this guy doesn't go to work and spends all his free time at the computer. He's heard that he's been playing a lot of games. At this time, Tim was sitting at his computer talking to his subscribers. He said it would be hard to write everything, so he started a stream to talk about everything. There are 2 NPCs in the game right now. Both the human's name is Dawn, and his job is Assistant 7th. Both of them have highly developed AI, and it even feels like you're talking to a real person. And he even suspects that every NPC has a hidden appreciation scale. Although the sensation of pain is present, there is a certain threshold. Perhaps there are some mechanics in the game that protect against excessive pain. But of course, it can also be the body's own defense mechanism. For example, if you hit your hand with a stone, nothing will happen, but if you pinch yourself, you will feel it. And now he thinks developers should give players more freedom and allow them to adjust the level of sensation, for example. And personally, he is very satisfied with the current feeling, but there are players who want to regulate these indicators on their own. And in order to stream it, Brother Guan would have to ask his company for permission. As for Revival, as a high-level player, he hasn't had to use it yet. But according to the rules, they will lose points that can be earned by completing tasks. The most annoying thing is that you have to wait 3 days to revive. And he's not interested in it anyway. If there's some brave soul who wants to try it, let them tell them later what it's like. Suddenly, Tima remembered Brother Guang and asked if he was here, and could he fulfill his request. He really wants the players to be allowed to choose their gender. At this time in the wasteland of 404 Asylum, Guan was watching Tim's stream and saying he was a total douche. 7 suddenly walked over to and asked the administrator if they needed to increase the number of players. Guang replied that there was no need to hurry. He needed to prepare a test for the next batch of players. This Tima guy is pretty popular. He heard that he was one of the top 200 players in PUBG. And thanks to his publicity, even those who were just watching from the sidelines got hooked. And he even made him the admin of a group chat room. Guan thought for a moment and said to turn on the voice input and confirmed that Tim's words were generally correct. So he would just give them some additional information. He gave them information about appreciation, but created a girl where he asks the players what they're looking at. After all, there's nothing here for them. Players got even more information, and everyone was surprised that there are hidden missions and hidden classes. Guan explained everything and said they could see the full information on the official website, and he has work to do. And he'll also say that Brother Tim's review is pretty good. He suggests uploading it to the forum for all to see. Tima got excited and started yelling that he got Brother Guan's approval. That's the biggest motivation. After that, Guan lay back in his chair and said that he thought the first synchronization with the clones had gone quite well. And suddenly he remembered that Tima had written that new players would need an official in-game helmet to synchronize with the clone within the game. He turned to the 7th and said that since players could connect to clones, could they also connect their consciousness to one of them? After all, he had somehow managed to get in here. 7 replied to the administrator that he would help him figure it out. But after a few minutes, he apologized and said he didn't have the relevant information about his DNA sequence in the database. He didn't think the gentleman would be able to use clones. Guan cheered him up and said that it was nothing, no need to worry about it. But would he be able to use the results of his examination to calculate the characteristics the way he did for others? 7 thought for a moment and replied that he could do it. Guan looked and saw that the level was level 5. And that meant that the development progress of his genetic sequence had reached 5%. But the first administrator was a genius if he could combine information about over 120 clones into these 5 characteristics. Guan asked the assistant if he could show him information about the players of the closed alpha testing. 7 replied that of course. 7 suddenly looked surprised and said that his characteristics were an order of magnitude higher than the clones. Guan noticed that they were indeed higher. But why isn't his genetic sequence in the database? And let them not tell him that he is, in fact, a mistake, and he was not in the plans of the first administrator. Guan suddenly stood up abruptly and said, "Interesting. Compared to a life planned by someone else, a life full of mysteries is definitely more interesting." But the system did not leave him without a gift and showed him that he had a reward to receive. Guan asked in surprise, did he get the reward? 7 replied that the gentleman had enough points to open a medium-level box. Guan said, well then, and we'll try it. But Guan hoped that as long as he didn't get a bottle of cough syrup, then all was well. But upon opening the box, smoke appeared, and 7 asked, what prize did the gentleman get? 7 looked surprised and said that the administrator had gotten something good. Guan asked, a permanent minimum strength increase? It is definitely better than cough medicine. But this thing has been stored for 200 years. Can it be used? He opened the capsule and felt a shiver run through his body. 7 told the administrator not to worry. Everything here is of the highest quality. Guan listened and told the assistant that since he said so, he would try it, and hoped there would be no problem. So he injected it directly into his arm. After that, Guan started waving his hands and asked, is that it? He can't feel any difference. Has the medicine expired or something? 7 replied to the gentleman to wait for a while. Guan looked and said that no effect is better than a negative effect. But suddenly his eyes turned red, and he immediately wondered what was going on. His whole body is suddenly numb. He even feels a wave of warmth approaching his heart. Guan just got excited in the moment and suddenly said, why didn't anything happen? Did the medicine really have an expiration date? And since this item is 200 years old, he doesn't think there has been much change in his body. But at this point, he didn't care. Lucky there wasn't a bug in that tainted medicine, but just in case. He ordered the 7th to help him do a full body examination and have him give a good check both outside and inside. 7 replied that he understood everything and proceeded to analyze it. Guan said that although the progression of genetic development had not changed, the characteristics of strength and physique had increased by 1 point. 7 was surprised and told the administrator that if his strength increased by 1 more point, they would be twice as strong as a normal adult male. It is normal for a normal 20-year-old guy who has never had any special training, to have up to 5 points in strength and physique. The number 5 is the reference value for all characteristics. Guan said that this meant that 1 point of strength and physique was equivalent to 20% of the physical strength of a normal adult male. Suddenly, Guan asked the 7th what time it was. The 7th immediately showed the present time. Guan said the players will be online in an hour and a half, and he would be waiting. 7 replied that okay. He would go get ready. Suddenly, Guan saw that the task had been updated again. Yesterday, there was only 1, but now there were 20. But the new main assignment didn't show up, and maybe the conditions weren't met. But seeing the conditions about daily, he thought, does that mean it will be updated every day? Guan counted and said that 20 tasks, a total of 150 bonus points, would come out. He would die of fatigue if he did alone. We need to spend a few points and call on the bowman to help. He decided he would ignore these daily missions. Right now, the generator mission is a priority. He can't live the life of a noble man in an asylum when everything outside is left at entry level. But nothing would be solved if he just sat there. So he decided to pick the newcomers among the registered players and see if they're useful or not. The system immediately showed that the current number of participants was 35. Guan rejoiced and said, "Here comes a dozen fresh onions." And it seemed that yesterday's chat discussion had worked as it should. But there are only a few hundred members in the Bulls Horses Club chat room. And maybe these 35 people are all active people. And now he's presenting them with a brand new version, something they've never seen before, and have them come in at 8:00 tonight. Guan realized that if he wanted to attract more people, it might be worth using new advertising strategies. But it is not possible to place advertisements. The official site is not registered in the country, and more likely even the North is not on the ground. And what's more, as the number of users increases, there are bound to be those who will cause many problems. And under his imagination, girls will start saying the clothes are so awful, and they will ask him, how can he make her walk around in this? Guan realized that he needed to increase the requirements for beta players, and he could ask 7th to move the application form from the first page of the website to the second page. Players will need to register, as well as provide a phone number and shipping address to apply, and so can weed out people who don't want to play and unsuitable players. Guan sat down at his computer and said that with the new feature selection function, it would be easier to attract normal users who like to play. The player who is ready to participate received the notification and opened it sighed, because I hope that this message is not from a client. And she has no ideas at all. She can't think of anything. It's given her a headache. The girl was the creative director and a member of the chat room. She is currently busy organizing the company's fashion show. She has no time to play games. And there's been a lot of active conversation in chat lately. And they seem to be talking about hyper-realistic immersive games. She thought that these people were specially hired for publicity, and such a game couldn't exist. But if she tried it, she wouldn't lose anything. What if it's all true? She got into the chat and said that this new admin named Light must be the developers. And even Timo worships him, and it seems like this game is worth trying to get into. She went to the website and saw that it said that strength represents the strength of the body tissues, meaning muscles and bones. It also includes the player's weight, melee damage, and throwing range. The agility system is the player's reaction speed, ability to coordinate movements, and many other physical attributes. In short, players with higher dexterity scores are more agile in combat and can more easily dodge attacks. But the physique is determined by the player's vitality and resilience, which basically reflects the speed of regaining lost health, resistance to certain abnormal conditions, and immunity. In turn, there's also intelligence, but it is not the same as IQ or logical thinking. This characteristic affects the character's learning ability and mental health recovery rate. At the same time, it affects the player's compatibility with neural devices. A character with high intelligence can control more devices at the same time. And intuition characters with developed intuition have a better sense of danger. They are also more likely to find hidden clues and traps. The girl listened to everything and said that there was nothing special about this game. But suddenly she received a notification from which she was surprised. She saw that there would be a feature added to the game of plastic surgery and body transformation, all the new trends of today's fashion industry. She stood up abruptly and started shouting that this was it. She had finally found inspiration, and it's great. She was so inspired by this game that she said she's going to order this game right now and start playing. The girl rejoiced and said that that was it. She had registered, and all that's left is to wait for the game to launch. And she hopes that she can be inspired to create new costumes. At this time, Guan was lying down, and suddenly the notification for new entries came in. Guan said that the registrations are more active this time than last time. As he thought, promotion is very important. Nowadays, even a good product needs promotion. He looked at his watch and immediately jumped up from his chair. Guan said that it wasn't the time to do this because the players should have already entered the game. Seven met them and said that it was 6 o'clock in the morning in the wastelands. Horsey looked and said that his strength type is very good, but his intelligence is only 3 points. But he doesn't feel that dumb. But Tima said he's so smart on that alone. But his main ability is intelligence and dexterity. But why isn't he some kind of Massimo's brain? But Feng answered the same thing, that his strength is in intelligence. He has 7 points, but his strength only scored 3 points. Wei had been putting up with it all this time, and suddenly grabbed his stomach and said he couldn't take it anymore. Let the 7th quickly tell me where the toilet is. 7 replied that he apologized, but there was only a B1 level cultivation room here. There are no amenities. In addition, the senses of players with intuitive type are more developed, so whether he can calm down. Horsey told the others to hold him back. This guy is surprisingly strong, but thank goodness he has 7 points of strength. Wei yelled for them not to even dare say anything about holding back. Tima asked the guy, did he not have everyone at home? If he did that here, the NPC's recognition would fall. Wei suddenly felt that something incredible was coming. Something incredible. His shit must stay with him. But Guan came in and said no fighting. Have everyone line up immediately. The disciples immediately obeyed the order and stood in line. Guang remembered that yesterday he had told them of his gratitude, and already today they were trying to please him. And now he would continue to maintain that majestic image. Guan told his disciples that they were running out of time and had much to do. And to keep the plans on track, the outpost must be completed before winter set in. Guan revealed that food, drinking water, fuel, they need to stock up on everything they need. They also need fortifications and ground shelters. And they can find out the details by checking the sign at the entrance to the hospital. Tima suddenly said that it looked like the developers had updated the quest system. Feng asked, so there was no mission to find the generator? Horse, in turn, was glad that he had a chance to stretch his muscles again. But Wei didn't say anything at that moment and just held his stomach. Guan said that for the time being, if there were no questions, then we could proceed. Wei couldn't help himself and raised his hand to say that he wanted to go to the toilet. Guan realized that he wanted to survive so badly that he had forgotten to take care of this problem. When there are more players, eating, drinking, and toileting will become a huge problem. Guan told him that Wei should follow him. But the player asked him to go slower or he wouldn't be able to hold on. But suddenly Horsey shouted at him to shut his mouth, and he felt like he wanted to now too. Feng was silent the whole time, but suddenly said that diarrhea in the game was too realistic. But upon arriving at the mission point, the students started to say, what a stench. Tima said it's a hard life without a toilet. But Wei started talking and felt his ass burning and asked the guys, did they have the same thing? Were they really wiping themselves with nettle leaves? Feng suddenly asked, where nettles? Then you just have to be patient. Guan thought he was going to warn them that they could use the cloth for that, but they gave a derriere as soon as they came to the surface. But suddenly the students turned around and walked over to the administrator. Tim said that he was proposing to build a restroom on the base. The others were also in agreement. But Horsey added that they could also dig a deep hole to collect the caciques there. And you can also mix compost with plant ashes and sawdust so that aerobic bacteria and fungi can process the organics while producing heat. This will help to kill pathogens and pathogens in the feces. And thus, they will have a fertilizer. Guan suddenly remembered that Beth Street collects feces from toilets and livestock manure to sell to Brown's farm. And maybe they make fertilizer there, too. But Tima said his hometown mixes and seals fecal matter and organic residue and creates a boiler to produce biogas. Anaerobic bacteria turn such a mixture into flammable methane. Such biogas can be used for batteries that run on methane. They can use it to build a power plant for the toilet. Guan again remembered that Bet Street does not have a biogas boiler, but Bronze Farm does. And it turns out the feces are used to generate electricity. And, theoretically, they could build their own power station. Guan told the boys it wasn't a bad idea. He'd think about it. And this onion is more useful than he thought. But then Feng entered the conversation and said that the only problem with building the toilet and boiler was that they would need a lot of sealing materials and gas storage containers. Guan told them not to hesitate. The wasteland is full of plastic, especially drink bottles and garbage bags. Survivors fear that burning plastic will release toxic substances. They use it for kindling only as a last resort. And all they have to do is look around carefully. You can find a lot of things in the neighborhood. For example, he found this bulletin board in the next neighborhood. It's got tasks and rewards on it. And he also added a quest to find plastic bags and bottles. Horsey got excited and said that this game is too realistic. Even the NPCs analyze the real situation and give new tasks. But Wei got curious too and asked if any of them noticed that when they presented their ideas, the administrator smiled. But Tima said that yesterday his brother said that if their relationship with the NPCs was good, they would have a chance to get hidden quests. But suddenly, Feng told the administrator that he had a better way for the generator. Guan replied to tell them. Feng asked if it was possible to find a car nearby. Any normal car should have a generator installed. Guan replied that there are a bunch of cars parked not far from here. Near Wetland Park, he checked them all. There is nothing there that can be reused. Feng said he wanted to take another look. If they find a working generator, they can use electricity in the outpost. Guan gave permission and said he had a condition. The wastelands are inhabited by hordes of mutants. They've already encountered one of them. It's very dangerous outside, so he would need to pick another person to go with him. He looked at Tim and knew his ability was intelligence, so he would need someone strong to go into the wilderness. Horsey thought that the administrator would ask him to go, and Wei felt a bad feeling too. Guang said that he needed to choose one more person to go with him, and Wei will go with him. Let them follow him, and he will give them a map and equipment. Wei was initially surprised and then accepted the order and replied that he understood. Horsey was shocked that the administrator had chosen this kid even though he was stronger and better suited for battles. But Tima said that perhaps, after analyzing the situation, the administrator decided that his intuition would be needed more in this situation. Wei apologized and replied to the guys that he would go get his equipment and finally get out of this newbie village. Feng listened to all of this and said that this jerk definitely likes pissing people off. Horsey didn't like that and shouted at him not to be so cocky, and let him say it when he came back alive. On the way, Feng took the map over and said that they had arrived. They looked around and saw a bunch of abandoned cars in front of them. Wei was surprised and replied that it was no wonder the receptionist said there was nothing to catch. They took everything out. He told the guy to look around. Where the hell are they supposed to find the damn generator? Maybe they'll come back. Feng replied that since they were here, they couldn't leave empty-handed. When he approached the car, he tried to open the hood with his hands, but he couldn't do it. He got angry and told the guy to come over and help with it. Wei stood back and was even scared, but he told him not to make a fuss. He realized that even though they had been playing with him for years, he still didn't know what he was doing with his life. They both stood in front of the hood and, grabbing it with both hands, opened it with ease. Wei looked at it and asked, "Is that a generator?" Feng replied that he thought it was, and asked the guy if he said he knew how to drive. Have him help him figure it out. Wei asked, "Do the hours played in the NPC count?" But he remembered that Feng has his own machine. Why is he asking for it? Feng replied that he lives in a teacher's dormitory, and, of transportation, he only has a bicycle. Wei said he didn't believe it. Feng started looking around the car and said that this is very strange, and why isn't he there? Wei asked what isn't there. Feng replied that the propulsion is in place, but he can't see the power supply. Wei said it's been 200 years. The survivors have scattered everything. I wish he'd stop playing dumb. Maybe there's something worthwhile in the trash can. Why don't we go there? Feng realized that Wei was right, but there was still a chance. Judging from the details on the front of the car, the technological level of the pre-war society was quite high. And perhaps during this period, the built-in power supply was replaced by a remote power supply. And it looks like it would be impossible to find a generator among this pile of junk. Wei suddenly told his friend to come here. He found something amazing. Feng asked, "What is it? A generator? Have him wait for it. He'll be right over." Wei answered him that was not, and he found a hole in the ground. Feng in turn said it was the entrance to a drain. Wei was very curious and suggested that the guy go see what was there. He doesn't feel any danger. But Feng told him to stop. Wei turned around and asked what. The guy replied that even the receptionist didn't talk about this place. It's too reckless to go there. Wei said that if even he wasn't aware of it, then they should definitely investigate the place. Didn't he say that they shouldn't come back empty-handed? But what if they can find items that will trigger hidden quests or summon new NPCs? Many games have beautiful ladies trapped in dungeons. Wei's imagination told him different, where the girls surrounded him and rejoiced that his brother had saved them from death. And Feng's imagination was different altogether. He saw the generator in front of his eyes, and saying that he didn't agree with it. But the hidden dungeons in this game are worth exploring. They might even find a secret treasure chest. Wei hugged his friend and said that was great, and they should get ready. He would get them a bag where they could put the items. Feng replied that was fine, but he would remind them what the receptionist told them when they left. But they made up their minds and went down the tunnel. Wei noticed mushrooms on the ground and asked what they were called. Feng replied that maybe some kind, he doesn't know what it is, and he had never seen them in real life. Wei was very interesting and offered to take a couple with him. Upon picking them up, he said they looked cool. You can even see colored lights if you look closely at the lines. And I even wonder what it tastes like. Feng replied that it was better to go back and ask if they were edible or not. It's a game, but there's no need to get in the way. In Hua country, more than 8 people have died this year after being poisoned by poisonous mushrooms. After a few hours, Feng said that they had packed up the place and it was time to go back. But Wei replied that no, this place is pretty safe. They could go further. Wei started to run into the darkness, but Feng was not in time and asked him to wait and take his time. But Wei was completely distraught and replied that there would be something cooler ahead. But in that very second, everything changed. Feng caught up with him and asked him what he was doing. He almost crashed into him. And why did he suddenly stop? Wei sensed the danger and realized that this was not good. This cursed, oppressive feeling is the same as when they encountered the big blackbird. He hoped it wasn't a mutant. He turned around and started to run away. Feng asked him to wait. Could he explain first and then act? Wei asked him to stop standing and yawning. It was time to run. But it turned out to be much worse, for the monsters started moving towards them, sensing blood. Tima, meanwhile, under the hot sun, said that it was ready and he was tired as a dog. Horse also replied that even carrying bricks was not as painful as this. But then Guan came in and said it wasn't bad. He'll give each of them 200 points as a reward. And in the future, we'll have to keep feces and urine separate because the mixture is too viscous. And besides, urine is sterile, so you can sprinkle on the cultures. But that's enough for now. There's a creek within a kilometer. Let them be extremely careful when they go to bathe, because there are a lot of mutants there. Guan realized that he didn't have a shower either. There would be hundreds of people living here in the future, and maintaining hygiene could be a problem. And there is virtually no stockpile of medication in the shelter, and in the event of a pandemic, there would be serious consequences. Tima asked, maybe build a bathhouse? Perhaps someday the girl players would join them. Horse was also supportive and said what a great idea. And naturally, it's not like they can't let girls wash in the street. Horsey seconded and said he was right. There will be hot water there too. And now they will build a place where they can rub each other's backs. Tima also said it would help them bond. The boys visualized all of this, and Tima said his mood lifts just thinking about it. Hormy also hopes that the girls will arrive soon. Guan looked at them and thought that he had never seen such shameless people before, and there were 2 of them. But at that moment, they heard Wei screaming for help. Arriving on the scene, Wei said it was close. He almost fell into the pit, but Feng couldn't help himself and crashed into him, and together they fell into the pit. At the moment of the fall, Feng told him that he told him to warn before doing something. Tima went up to them and asked how they were. Horsey said they had thrown a huge pile of leaves in there, so they wouldn't die. But in a moment, Guan came up and took the mushroom in his hands and thanked them for their hard work. Let them go get some water and wash up, and soon they'll have a little rest. Guan looked and did an analysis over the mushroom, thinking they had found something worthwhile. After resting, they sat down to eat, and Guang knew that it tasted like unleavened green bean soup. Did they really like it that much? Or is it because he is a good cook? But Guan turned to the guys and asked where they got it from. Feng replied that although they couldn't get a generator, they found a lot of blue mushrooms near the gutter entrance in the parking lot. So they decided to collect them. Wei immediately shouted that he was the one who found that place. But he asked the receptionist if the mushrooms were edible. Feng also asked maybe they could be used as an ingredient for enhancement potions. Guan laughed and told him not to make things up. These mushrooms are called blue angels, and if you eat them, you'll meet a real angel within the hour. Unless, of course, they're a mutant immune to poison. Earlier, Charlie had told him that the blue caps contained a particular substance that could effectively heal non-lethal injuries caused by gamma rays. Guan told the boys that although blue angels can't be eaten, they're the main raw material for making radiation-reducing agents. And they were lucky they didn't go any farther. And these mushrooms tend to grow near mutant leech nests. The students asked in amazement, mutant leeches? Guan answered them that the cubs were the size of a palm. They're no different from ordinary leeches except for their mouths. However, once they become adults, they quickly grow to a meter or more. The largest individuals may even reach 3 meters. He has heard that their feeding habits also change. They can devour a living person in one bite. Wei immediately realized that they were wandering near the gate to hell. Feng realized that the sounds they heard were those of mutant leeches. Guang suddenly turned to them and said that they had said earlier that they remembered where that drain was. Feng replied that he remembered. It's right here. He had marked it on the map. Guan said that he understood everything, and seeing the dot on the map, he felt that this ray was becoming more and more useful. Guan showed the boys that they both get 220 points each for this task, 200 for finding the mutant's nest, and 20 for collecting blue mushrooms. The guys smiled and thanked the receptionist for this. Guan at this moment didn't expect them to bring such finds this time. To be honest, these mushrooms are hard to find, but they can't give them too much as a reward. Otherwise, they'll start recklessly searching for blue angels to get points. If that happens, they will just die there. And he didn't even think there would be a mutant drunkard's nest nearby. And anyway, he'd better keep his eyes open until he found the generator for the active matter extractor. But first he'll deal with the mushrooms. There's about 2 kilos of them. The market price for 50 grams is 1 chip, so that's 40 chips for the whole thing. That's his savings for 6 months. And that's the price set at the recycling center on Bet Street. The real cost should be twice as much. Guan said he was going to resupply. They'll all stay here. And remember not to go too far away. At 5 o'clock in the evening, Seven will open the elevator so they can return to the shelter. He will tally the results of their work, and they can ask him if they can't understand something. After that, they stood in front of the map, and Tima said that it was very strange. If blue mushrooms are used to make radiation-reducing agents, why do they only get 20 points for them? That's equivalent to cutting down 2 trees. Wei asked him if something was wrong. The guy replied that yes, there was. Usually the reward for a task is equal to its difficulty. They not only discovered a new territory, but also collected valuable materials. So the reward should be greater. Feng asked him what he thought the reason for this was. Tima replied that priority. Wei asked with surprise what priority. Tima replied that last time the administrator told them that the first priority was survival. Wei suddenly backed up the conversation and said what he recalled. He never reads the story dialogues in games, usually just skips them. Tima looked and said he thought the list of tasks on the board was incomplete. In this game, they were given freedom of choice. Missions could not only be given out by NPCs, but also triggered by the players themselves. Feng asked him why he thought so. Tima replied that today's assignments were given to them by the administrator after they voiced their suggestions. Although they didn't find the generator, they did find the mutant nest and collected the mushrooms, so they were rewarded just like he and Horsey. So as long as their actions don't go against the current needs of the shelter, they can earn points. And the reward is directly related to who did how much. Feng replied that he understood. But you can also get points by completing the tasks on the list, and an impressive number of them. Tima said that's right. He wanted to say that too. And do they remember the developer talking about the gratitude scale? Feng replied that he remembered everything and asked what he was getting at. Tima replied that the reward for completing the tasks from the board with the prots is guaranteed, and doing them actively could better reveal their abilities. And that should help win the administrator's acceptance. Wei said understandably, and that makes sense. Tima said that these assumptions are based on the fact that this game is a hyper-realistic, fully immersive game, and that the administrator's behavior was not pre-programmed and is governed by the logic of the game. But if his intelligence is not as high as they assume, that conclusion would be wrong. However, he is much smarter than the seventh. It is as if there's a living person in front of them. Perhaps this character is just a person being controlled by a person. And there may even be some hidden agenda. Horsey asked, does he want to say that the administrator is cheating them? And don't let him say he's exploiting them. Kors asked, and what did he think they should do? Tima replied that there was no point in worrying about that right now. That the administrator might be a real person is only his suggestion. And besides, not only did he not hurt them, he saved them. He is more concerned about how to increase NPC appreciation before the second phase of testing. Tima pulled his hand out and said that he was suggesting that they team up so they could have an advantage over the other players from the start. The boys agreed at once, without even thinking it over. But Wei stopped and didn't put up his hand, but said he didn't refuse, but wanted to know more about it. Tima said that from now on, they were a team, and will share information and help each other. They need to use their abilities. They can explore the lakeshore at Wetland Park, and keep an eye out for mutants and their movements. If they find places that look like their nests, have them mark them on the map, and let them remember not to get too close to them, and don't try to fight the mutants. After all, they need to find a safe place to get water. Wei was greatly surprised and noticed that Tima had just appointed himself the leader. Tima even said that they would continue cutting down trees. Horse also replied that later, when he was out, he would dig around on the internet and find a way to use the wood. At this time, the brigand arrived with a girl with chains on her. The girl was completely exhausted and could barely move. A group of robbers saw her and said she was hot. And the girl even has a nice body, but it's a pity that such a tasty cabbage will go to feed the pig. The chief asked the brigands what they were staring at. Let them take their feet immediately and unload the goods. And there's no need to delay Master Li. The chief approached Master Li and said that he was the representative of the Bet Street chapter and welcomed Mr. Li said this woman is the merchandise their head ordered. Have it delivered directly to him. And let her also tell him that it's extremely difficult to find top-quality merchandise nowadays. So let him take better care of it rather than ruin it in a couple days. The man in charge replied to make sure that Mr. Li would deliver it safely, as he always did. At this point, Guan walked over and saw that the man named Li was here again. He also brought in some tank-grown merchandise. And that's what the rumors are. Earlier, old Charlie talked about the slave trade in Jushu. He thought he was lying, but he didn't expect to see it with his own eyes. But only the local chief can pay for that kind of luxury. More importantly, the caravan from Jushu came here, so he has a chance to find a good buyer. Li threw coins in the workers' faces and said that since the goods were unloaded, they were free to go, and this tribute was for work. On the way out, Guan waited for Mr. Li around the corner and asked if he had a moment. He had what they needed. Li was surprised and asked him who he was. Guan raised his hands and replied that he had no bad intentions. He just wants to squeeze something. He realized that his nanocarbon body armor would buy him 5 seconds to escape. Unless, of course, he got shot in the head. Mr. Li asked, selling? Is there a new scavenger on Bet Street? Guan made no secret of it and said his name. Li said he didn't care. They don't cooperate with small-time merchants. And let him offer his trash to old Charlie. Guan was surprised at her words, and opening the bags, asked if he was sure that 2 kilos of this goodness was trash. Li looked at it and was surprised. But he asked where did the guy get it? Guan replied that it was in the sewer near the mutant leech's nest. Would he be willing to go and check it out himself? Li answered him not to worry. He was just asking, and asked the guy what he wanted for it. Guan replied that there were 2 kilograms, so he was asking for 200 chips. He realized that Bet Street gives 1 for 50 grams, but they're worth a lot more than that. Zab even gives 1. Mr. Li smiled and said sure. And then Guan realized that he had cheaped out and should have named a price 10 times higher. That head sure sells that kind of thing for a lot more value. Li tells the guy that he hopes old Charlie doesn't find out about their deal. Guan replied that, of course, he didn't want any trouble either. Li laughed and said that the guy was smart, and he can give him 200 chips right now, but feels he'll trade them for some stuff later. Why doesn't he buy them from him right away? He'll save a lot more that way. He's still got stuff left, and maybe give him a 20% discount. How does he feel about that? Guan replied that he wanted to buy a firearm, if he had one. When he heard about the discount, he realized that he had no reason to refuse if his place was cheaper than Bet Street. Li pulled out the gun and said no problem. This 9mm rifle with a slide bolt and iron barrel would cost him 200 chips, and he can give it 30 rounds. However, the bullet is 1 chip. It's a fair trade. Guang looked at the weapon and asked, is the price already discounted? Li replied that it was. If it's expensive for him, he can choose something cheaper. The 5mm caliber pistol in his hand cost 100 chips. It would be useful against marauders, but would not advise using it in a battle with mutants. Guan thought about it and realized that even with the discount, it was still expensive, a greedy speculator. Guan said he wants a 9mm rifle and 60 rounds of ammunition. And for 25 chips, he needs food and other supplies. Li asked the guy, is he haggling with him? Guan replied that the mutant leech's nest has more than 2 kilograms of these mushrooms, and he sure masterly understands what that means. Li asked the guy, does he want him to invest in him? Guan replied, why not? He can bet that he can make a lot of money even at that price. And if he invested in it, it would bring him 10 times as much. Li thought about it and said, that's not a bad guess. Li at this moment thought, just how much radiation reduction agent could he prepare if he took 2 kilograms of Blue Angels to Jusher? Not to mention the rifle. He would be able to buy them up by the hundreds. Li held out his hand and said, let alone a rifle. Even he could buy them up by the hundreds. He rarely did business directly with scavengers, but he would make an exception for him. He was interested in him. Guang shook his hand and thanked him for being so cooperative. Li replied that he knew his name since he had already introduced himself, and hoped that they would continue to cooperate further. Li told the boy to take the rifle, 60 rounds of ammunition, and some other ammunition. Guan thanked Master Li for being so generous. Li told him to use it, but in his head, he knew that the best product was somewhere near where the nuclear bomb fell. After the purchase, Li told the guy that few are honored to get chips out of his hands. But he's the exception. Guang replied that it looks like Lady Luck is on his side. Li said that he hoped it would continue to be so, because their cooperation was just beginning. After all, the guy himself knows that mushrooms grow near the nests of these creatures. Guan realized that this was correct. Who knows how many leeches are hiding in the lair? And the worst part is that firepower is ineffective against them. And what's more, they're incredibly survivable and have a terrifying ability to regenerate. And even if cut in half, their parts form individuals, and small wounds do not threaten them. And as for fire, it doesn't matter if they're flammable or not. If you start a fire, everything of value burns with them. The losses would be enormous. Li told the guy that he would come here again at the end of the month, for the last time this year, and he hopes to see 20 pounds of blue mushrooms by then. And for that amount, he'll get 2,000 chips. And even he can order something. You don't have to pick up something that others don't need. Guan asked, and how does he know what he has? Guan realized that the crook was trying to steal from him again. Li took the board and said, there are pictures here. Let him flip left and right to choose. Guan took a look and saw that the charlatan had some pretty good items. Li told the guy that he felt like the guy knew how to use it, he wouldn't have to teach him, and even guarantees that the items are the same in person as in the photo. All of them are of excellent quality. In a moment, his eyes popped out, and he saw that there was a generator in the picture and the one they needed. Lee asked the guy what he picked. Lee looked at it and said he had a good eye. Even though it's a basic model, it's also the most durable. And as for the generator, if he's worried about running out of power, he might as well buy some batteries. And he also offers an exchange for a modest fee. A suitable energy battery only costs 150 chips. No matter how expensive it is to replace the battery, the price won't be more than 1,000. The exoskeleton can be worn under his clothes, but the generator, not every scavenger can afford it. Why would he need one? Guan answered him not to worry. He wasn't going to carry him to Bet Street. And in his head, the lad knew better than to dispel his doubts. Lee said he doesn't care what he does with it. Even if he says it was him who sold it to him, he won't admit it. After all, he's the one who's going to be in trouble. And it's getting late outside, so I'll see you soon. But Guan told him to stop and asked if the 20% discount was in effect for the items he ordered. Lee replied that the prices he saw were already discounted. Guan became very angry after saying this and was showing his middle finger in farewell. He was eager to squeeze all the juices out of him. Guan turned around, but realized that it was already getting dark, and it was already dangerous to return to the base now. It was better for him to stay in the house for the night. The vendors from the Bet clan were shouting at this moment that there were only 30 bars of juicer soap left. For just 3 chips, they could wash all the disgusting odors off their bodies. And then there's the vegetable oil from Brown's farm. 1 liter for 10 chips. And they can split the amount in half with someone if it's too expensive for them. Charlie at this point was trying to cope and was telling the customers that he had both salt and tobacco. He was so tired, let them choose for themselves. After all, he would get a little break. Suddenly, someone in charge said that there was an order to assemble from the head of the city. Have them line up immediately. And the chief said that by the end of the month, each house should provide 100 kilograms of wood and 2 square meters of fur. Let them give it to everyone. People started saying that the collection order is always in August and September. How on earth are they going to get through this winter? But the other guy said if they disobeyed, they'd be thrown out. It'll be winter soon. They're not going to go as a family to look for a place to live, are they? But the old man overheard their conversation and told them to forget about it. Compared to Brown's farm, they have a little more freedom. Guan realized that the head was going to make a fortune before having to make the last caravan of the year, and using the exchange supplies to spend this year in luxury. But it has nothing to do with him, for he will be gone before winter comes. But along the way he ran into that little girl he always fed. The grown-up guy yelled at her that she was a fool and to get out of the way immediately. But Xiaou stood her ground and said no. Big Brother told her to look after his house. Xiaou said, "What's the point of guarding a dead man's house?" Xiaou replied that he's not a dead man. He's not dead. He's alive. Xiaou told her to stop lying, that stranger hadn't come in 4 or 5 days. He asked, did the Yu family just want their share? He wasn't going to take everything. He would take the beam and the door for himself, and she could keep the rest. Xiaou was stubborn and told him to get out of here. Xiaou became very angry and waved his hand at her. But Xiaou replied that she wasn't going anywhere, and he dares to hit other people? Xiaou swung around and said if he wants to hit people, he can. Her father and brothers left anyway. Just then Guan came and caught his hand and asked, who said he was dead. Xiaou was shocked and asked the stranger. Xiaou saw her brother again and was over the moon. She said that he came yesterday and wanted to destroy his house. He also almost hit her. Guan asked, that's how it turns out? But then he is grateful to her for looking after his house. And as long as he's here, no one will dare to hurt her. So he asked little Wang, would he get off on his own, or did he need help? Junior Wang ran away and shouted after him to wait. He would definitely tell his father and brother about it. Xiaou told her older brother that she was grateful to him. Guang replied that they were just helping each other, and wondered why she kept looking at him. But he immediately realized what she really wanted. He handed her a lollipop and told her she had done a good job. Xiaou told her brother that she shouldn't, but she slowly reached out for the candy and thanked him for being so generous. Xiaou said she had nothing to do anyway, so she could look after the house while he was away. Guan replies that it's more like someone just wants the candy. But she's a reliable person, and he thinks the candy is worth it. But suddenly 3 guys asked Xiaou what she was doing here. When the girl heard the familiar voice, she was surprised and immediately realized that it was them. Xiaou realized that her father and brothers had returned. She didn't waste any time and immediately started running away. Guan immediately realized that Yu's family forbids her to communicate with him. But that can't be, because he and Yu talk often. Hu went to him and told him that he had been gone a long time. He thought he was already dead. Guan replied that his intuition seemed to be failing him. Hu told the boy that he was apparently right. The head of the city had just issued a levy order that every able-bodied man must bring 100 kilograms of wood and 2 square meters of fur by the end of the month. And there are 3 such men in their family, so 300 kilograms of wood and 6 squares of furs will have to be provided. Guan replied that he had heard of this when he came here. Hu asked him, had he already thought about how he was going to get fur? Does he want to go to the forest in the north together to try his luck? The Li family says they've seen signs of deer migration, and if they catch 2, they'll get not only the hides but also the meat. Guan replied that he'd rather not. He would think of a solution to the problem himself. He realized they were going to hunt to the north. His base in the park is a little west of that area, and he hopes they don't cross paths. Hu tells the kid that he's pretty capable, but everything has a limit. The Wang family has the audacity to bully him because he is alone. Suddenly a thought occurred to him, and he said he had an idea. His sister would be able to get married next year, and if he's in a hurry, they can have the wedding ceremony today. Guan couldn't help but run away and replied that there was no need for that. Hu thought about it and realized that it was a pity. After all, if he and his sister had had a son, he could have become as important as old Charlie. Guan at this moment thought that brother who had just lost his mind. He wanted to marry lowly. Under his imagination, in the morning Xiaou would call him husband and wish him a good morning. Well, she asked him what he want to eat first, take a bath, or have a little romp. Guan felt sick at just such thoughts, and even if Xiaou had reached the marriageable age, he couldn't agree to this. On the second day outside the hospital, Horse said that freshly cut wood will crack and warp if it is not treated. Tima asked, and what should they do? Horsey replied that there are several ways. They could dry it on the fire, or paint on both ends and let it dry naturally. You could also put it in the water, but then it would be hard to get it out. And he hopes it doesn't rain in the next few days. But in fact, if they stopped harvesting logs into beams, they could repair the north and west walls of the hospital. But since this was not done initially, the wood will begin to rot if there is a prolonged rain. Tima asked, can we use cement as a building material? Course asked with surprise, cement? Tima replied that there's a lot of concrete waste in the wasteland and even in the hospital. It is possible to use them. Hormy said that pieces of blocks cannot be used, but if you mix them with cement, it is not difficult to build concrete walls. Reinforced with rebar. Even though it will be a tofu building, it's still better than wood. And to use the waste, they need cement. And it requires enough coal and a stove that can handle temperatures up to 1,450 degrees. Suddenly behind them, Wei shouted that they were back and had made a grand discovery. Feng said that there is a river east of Linghu Lake, although there are no other bodies of water on the map. It must have formed within the last 200 years. Wei went on to say that they had traveled the entire lakeshore from the eastern part to the southern part, and now he would take out a map and show them. Feng said the crosses indicate mutant nests. The circle is a safe place to fetch water. Tima looked at the bucket and asked, what's this slop? Is it cement? Feng replied that they had found it by the river. At that time, there was a girl who was swimming, and when she saw them, she shouted that they were perverts. Wei told her not to misunderstand them. They were not doing it on purpose, and he thought he would come across a charming NPC, but all they found was dirt. Feng said that he figured it could be useful as a building material, so they brought it over. Horsey said he would look at it now and tell you all about it. But he dipped his finger and told the boys that it could not be used because it would be easily washed off with water. But now they have some good raw materials for their furnace. Wei asked with surprise, kiln? Tima replied that he had been discussing how to make cement. But Feng asked, is he sure he can build it? Horsey replied, "Why not give it a try? Let them not forget that they are in the game. And this place is an incredibly realistic sandbox. There's nothing out of control, and it's time to get to work already." But Horse told the boys that this amount of mud would not be enough to build a furnace. Let them get some more buckets. Wei was surprised and thought that Wei was a construction foreman, and he seemed to be used to bossing people around, only to have them carry bricks. Horse assigned everyone to their tasks and left himself and Tim to chop trees. The boy replied that fine, he was ready. Horsey said they need to go all out, and they're going to give the administrator an unbelievable surprise. Soon there was a scream from the forest, and the boys shouted for someone to come to their rescue. After all, the monster bear had caught up with them. Suddenly, Feng didn't slip and fell. Wei saw this and froze for a moment and shouted at him to get up quickly. But the monster was already ready to eat him whole. Feng had already left everything behind and said goodbye to his life. Guan suddenly woke up abruptly and, taking the weapon in his hand, said that it was just a nightmare. And because of this everything he'd been stockpiling for 5 months was almost gone. But he wondered what they were doing there now. Even though he was near them, he was still worried. But suddenly someone knocked on the door, and Xiaou told her brother it was her and asked her brother if he was home. Guang was surprised and thought, "What is she doing here so early?" Guang opened the door and asked her what was wrong. Xiaou told her brother that she had brought him some cookies. The guy was surprised by this. He even blushed and asked her, "Is this for him?" He took the cookie and tasted it. Xiaou told her brother that she would tell him a secret. Her other brother asked her to tell him that she had personally made these cookies for him. Guang said that he understood everything, and he didn't expect who to turn out to be so devious. He asked her why she had told him that. Xiaou replied that because she didn't want to lie. Suddenly, the younger Wang came up to them and asked him, "Is he also going hunting?" Xiaou was frightened and said that it was Wang Defu and his brother. Guan told her not to be afraid. Let her go inside the house for now. The younger Wang told the girl not to die there. But Dafu put a hand on his shoulder and told him to stop coddling. Dafu walked next to Guan, but didn't say anything to him. They just looked at each other and were silent. Guan immediately realized that this guy was not an easy guy. He turned around to the girl and said that it was fine now, but he should go now too. Xiaou replied that it was good, and let him be more careful, and she will take care of his house and wait here. Guang understood that Xiaou was without a doubt a charming girl, but she was still too young. We'll have to wait a few years, and he'll think about it when she's older. Guang went to Charlie and said there are 21 chips. He needs 7 kilos of green wheat. Guan asked the old man if he had any tobacco leaves to make jerky. How much could he get for 4 chips? Charlie replied that 50 grams for one. Guan said that was fine, and then he would take 200. He realized that even though he was running low on supplies, it would be easier to hunt with a firearm, and the surplus meat wouldn't go to waste. Charlie pulls out a sack and says here's 7 kilos of green wheat, and it seems to him that the guy bought 5 a few days ago. Guan asked, "Is there a problem?" Charlie replied that no, it wasn't so bad to stock up. Then Guan realized that he had been careless and brought no useful objects or valuable loot, but made 2 major purchases in such a short period of time. And if the head gets wind of it, he'll think he's going to start a gang. And then, quite possibly, he'll hire people to finish him off. And Guan realized that he was really jealous of survivalist characters. They can run and jump around the city ruins, carrying huge equipment. If only things were as easy in real life. Guan turned around and said he was off. Charlie told the guy that he thought the guy needed a bull. Guan realized that the old man was right. These things are pretty heavy. I wonder if the lister would be willing to sell one of his 2-headed cows. Charlie said goodbye and told the boy to be careful. Guan said goodbye and replied that he understood and would try his best. But still in his head, Guan realized that he needed to rush out quickly. Even though the old man is kind to him because he is also from the asylum, but he still works for the head of the city. Suddenly at the base, Wei told the guys that the administrator had returned. Guan was greatly surprised and thought, what is this? He didn't even remember giving the assignment to build a furnace. Tima met the receptionist and said that he was finally back. Guan replied that he had spent the night in the open air and asked the guys how they were doing. Did they encounter any mutants or other survivors? Tima replied that they hadn't met anyone, but they had managed to build kills. They will be able to make coarse-grained cement with them. First, they will need to burn the tree bark to produce ash. Then mix it with water to filter out the potash water. They dried the resulting paste to extract calcium hydroxide and calcium carbonate to make cement. And all that remains is to put all the raw materials in the kiln and abrade them until they turn red-orange. Then mix it with water and river sand and get cement. Guan remembered that he had also tried to make cement from this mixture, but everything he created immediately fell apart. This method didn't work, and it looks like it was wrong. No wonder it didn't work out. Tima said they wanted to rebuild the hospital walls with cement, and they saved the potash water, and it could be used for tanning leather, which could be very useful to them. Guan told the boys they'd done a great job, and then he thought, how should he reward them? Tima said he was incredibly happy to share the burden of reviving civilization with him. He realized that the administrator's appreciation had definitely increased. Wei jumped on him and said that Tima had said they were a team. How could he take all the credit for himself? And it's not fair for him to take all the credit for himself. Tima told them to stop. They had it all wrong. That was not his intention. Guan told them that they had all done a good job, and let them allow them to have a helper as a reward for their efforts. He thought that physical work, such as chopping trees and dragging bricks, could help power-type players level up faster. And should he find such players to help them, Guan thought. Wei immediately told the receptionist that he should invite a girl this time. The others asked him the same thing. But Horsey told the boys that they had no taste at all. If you invite someone, it has to be a muscular woman. Guan replied to the boys that he would take their wishes into consideration and let them continue to work hard. The students told the administrator that they understood, but Tima decided to distinguish himself and said it was his mission to serve him, solemnly swearing before the banner of the Federation of Mankind. The boys immediately ran into the forest and shouted that they would cut down more trees. Guan was surprised and decided that he would just let them develop freely. We need to unload the supplies. With this much food, he would be able to feed another batch of players. Guan came to the headquarters and upon opening the system, saw that he had received another award. So he decided to open the box. Opening the box, he got 5 plastic-wrapped Chupa Chups, and they could be fruit-flavored. Guan got a little upset and said that if he had more of this salt, it would only be enough to cook a few dishes, and he needed more to preserve the meat. And suddenly he thought that if he exchanged it for crude salt from the city of Jushur, he could get 20 or even 30 times as much salt. But then he thought about it and said no, refined salt comes second in value after guns. If he's not strong enough to defend himself, the risks associated with the salt trade just aren't worth it. He got to work and said he would focus on building the base first. Guan opened the conversation in front of him and saw that the new members were nothing, although this foursome was doing a good job of advertising the game. After reading a bit of correspondence, he saw that one of the players is a chemist, and talking about the importance of getting ethanol and methanol is unnecessary. And acetone alone is quite valuable as a raw material for smokeless gunpowder. Guan clicked to see this guy's profile, for he noticed that he knew a lot. Guan analyzed it closely and noticed that it sold furniture, and thought that this would be perfect. With his knowledge, they would be able to use all the harvested wood wisely. Guan immediately messaged him and asked if he would like to participate in the clothes testing. The participant suddenly saw his phone begin to vibrate and completely ducked it. The participant didn't understand anything at first, but then he looked closer and realized it was a big shot from the gaming company, and he came to him. A participant received an invitation from Guanu, but wondered if he should give it a try. Although the internet is full of scammers, but what if this game is real? Guan will continue to communicate with him and send a message to the participant to send his application number to be registered. After that, he realized they now had a carpenter, and wondered what other talents were needed on the base. But suddenly, he noticed that one of the participants decided to create a conflict, and Guan saw that he immediately went to brag, and now he could no longer keep quiet. He decided he needed to find a way to calm this raging ray, but then he wondered if he should bring more people into the group. He reflected that since the base had more than 10 kilograms of food and a gun, he could start hunting too. The appearance of 2 more men shouldn't be a problem. Guan said that they have food, which means there must be someone to cook it. And now he has to find a cook. Guan wrote in the conversation that they needed a cook to test the mechanics of cooking. Many people immediately wrote back to him, and now he was left to choose one. He didn't realize who didn't know how to prepare 1 or 2 dishes. All that was needed at the moment were hands. Suddenly, he looked at all the applications and found the perfect candidate. Guan saw that the guy sent his resume, where he's a real cook, and he realized they needed this guy. After that, he went to the 3rd floor of the abandoned hospital. 7 rejoiced and said that at last the master had returned to him. Guan asked him what was wrong. 7 replied that he had 1 division left on the battery charge scale. Guan laughed and said that he thought it was something else. But suddenly he thought and asked, where should he look for a place to charge it? 7 replied that it has a wireless charging port on its case. You just need to go back to the shelter for a while. Guan immediately realized that this was why he hadn't seen a single outlet. And the computer, without the system unit, never shut down. It's wirelessly powered, too. Guan took it in his hands and said that now they would go and charge him. Suddenly, 7 turned to the Lord. The lad asked him what was the matter. 7 replied that he had just remembered that the power grid of their shelter was powered by a fusion reactor. Guan was shocked and asked, a fusion reactor? 7 replied that yes, it can produce energy for a very long time. The guy said it's just beautiful, and now we have to figure out a way to steal that electricity. 7 said, although it's probably not in the best condition right now. It's the year 2340. It's been a very long time since the shelter was built. Guan was surprised again and asked what would happen if the electricity ran out. 7 thought for a moment and replied that he didn't know. Because according to the plan, this shelter should have been opened 100 years ago. He doesn't know why it was delayed for a century. And don't be too pessimistic. The energy room of shelter 404 should be on the 3rd floor. And if he unlocked that level and replaced the fuel rods in time, everything would be fine. Guan realized that words were easy and thought, where can he find the fuel rods for the nuclear reactor? Guan went down to the shelter and told 7 that they had arrived and he could go charge in peace. Guan realized that there shouldn't be any big problems in the short term, even though the opening of the asylum had been delayed for 100 years. During this time, it was not operating at full capacity and should have been in power-saving mode. And perhaps the leftover electricity can be used for decades to come. But he's actually more worried about the upcoming winter. He doesn't have much time left to prepare. When he went outside, he was shocked by what he saw. After all, the students had already built 8 ovens. Horsey saw him and said that the receptionist had come. Guan replied that yes and went down to the lower floors for a while. He asked the guy if this was his idea. Horsey replied that this was made possible by the hard work of all the players. Guan told him not to be modest. He can see it. The organization will not forget his contribution. And in addition, on behalf of the organization, he will give them each 1,000 points as a thank you for discovering cement as well as building materials. And from now on, Horsey will be the head of the construction crew of the Asylum 404 outpost. And they can also use their creativity to design and build an outpost, but you can't go beyond the plan. Horse replied to the administrator that he would do everything in his power to build their home to the best of his ability. Wei began to get jealous and wondered why only Horsey had gotten the extra award. Guan said that was fine, but let him tell him his idea. Horse replied that yesterday, after leaving the game, he had explored the cement factory, and the worker told him that if you add iron powder to cement, it will become stronger and more durable. And since the wastelands are full of rusty metal, he mixed it with coal. They used the coal as a reducing agent to make iron by calcination, and then burned the resulting iron slag along with cement from wood ash. It is not possible to produce large quantities of cement with these earth kills alone. Therefore, he plans to utilize all the cement produced in the initial phase for construction of industrial facilities to further increase cement production. Guan listened and said it was a good idea, but is there much to be gotten from the bark? Horse replied that's why they need a more professional furnace, one that can handle temperatures up to 1,450 degrees. And then they can make cement with calcium carbonate content by burning limestone and clay, completely replacing wood ash. Guan told him that he had thought it out well, and let him continue to follow his plan. And he added that in a few days, 2 rookies will wake up from their slumber and join their pro team. He's planning a little banquet to welcome them. So he's got to get some game. He can't just treat them to porridge. And who wants to go hunting together? All the guys raised their hands and hoped they would go. But Guang said he didn't need so many people. Guang turned away and said that since his ability was intuition, he would be the one to go with him. The boy replied that he would gladly participate. Before leaving the shelter and going hunting, he asked Wei to take him to the mutant lair. Wei brought the administrator to the point and said that they had found them right here. Guan replied to him that it was very good that they had not gone any further. Guan told the guy it was time to go, and that wasn't their goal today. Wei asked, weren't they going to hunt? Guang replied that that was correct. Wei asked, then why are they getting farther and farther away from a forest? Guang replied that there was also a forest ahead. Wei was startled at the moment and even trembled a little. Their path was to the northern area of Qingchuan. Wei started to look around and saw that it was indeed a forest. Guan told him to be extremely careful from now on. After the apocalypse began, this place became a paradise for fungi and plants. Gradually, wild animals began to fill the cities. Under the influence of the 3 factors of radiation, biological weapons, and time, they turned into various mutants, generically called others. Guan looked around and said that the danger here is on a whole other level. Wei asked, is it really that bad? But he rejoiced greatly because he would finally meet new monsters in the game. How exciting. Guan told the guy to stay close and keep his nose clean. Wei replied that he understood perfectly. Suddenly Guan listened and thought, what was that voice he was hearing? Looking in the direction of the building, he said, very strange. Wei was immediately wary and asked what was wrong. Guan replied that there were traces of the survivors' vital signs. Wei asked with surprise, survivors? Could it really be the natives of the wasteland? And now he would definitely meet some new NPCs. Guang told him to put aside his impatience. There was nothing to get excited about. Wei became curious and asked why. Guan replied that because in such places strangers are more dangerous than beasts. But on the way he found something and stopped. The guy said high-sulfur gunpowder, stationary buttons, and pieces of iron. He immediately realized that there were probably predators or mutants nearby, and there are no other reasons for installing stretch marks near populated areas. It is designed for those who will not be able to notice it, so it does not pose any particular danger to humans. And, judging by the smell, not much time had passed since the explosion, 5 hours, maybe less. Guan asked the guy when he got outside, did he hear the sound of the explosion? Wei replied that he hadn't. Guan thought for a moment and, heading inside, told him to wait for him here. Wei asked the administrator what he was up to. Guang replied that he wanted to look around a bit. Wei immediately told him that he could go with him. But Guan abruptly turned around and looked with his evil gaze and said that he would wait here. Wei immediately realized that it was better not to mess with this guy. He could just send him away. He replied to the chief that he understood. Guan thought that he wanted to use Wei as bait, but now the situation was a little different. Their potential enemy is a group of predators or mutants. Bait is useless. They may, on the contrary, scare them away. And this place is too close to the shelter. Too much smoke. Sooner or later the locals will notice smoke or sound coming from there. And there will always be a lurking danger. If someone decides to become a threat to them, they will not hesitate to take action. Suddenly on the way, he noticed a pack of rats and said he would act without hesitation. Immediately, he swung his stick at them and crushed them. Guan said there were about 20 of them, too few for a nest. A few more, and it would be much harder to deal with them. Guan immediately went to the top of the building and looked around and saw the place where the tents were pitched. He knew that the survivors' strongholds fell into 2 categories. The first settled in houses that hadn't been badly damaged, and others live in ruins or open space, depending on their surroundings. Rebuilds are usually mutants with an average height of over 2 meters and a weight of 300 kilograms. and they eat everything from mushrooms and plants to the meat of mutated insects and mice. Of course, the most important delicacy for any of them is human flesh. Suddenly, Guan looked closely and saw movements below. He immediately realized that it was a mutant sentinel. If he and Wei continued on their way, they would be ambushed before they even reached the intersection. Guan took a closer look and saw that there were so many obstacles that he couldn't even count them. And judging by the size of this camp, there must be 20 to 30 of them. And even realized and knew that these mutants were not easy to deal with. And suddenly he saw the message and thought, why did the mission come right now? Guan immediately said that after receiving such a mission, he could safely say that he was offended. He now needs to kill mutants, and apparently the system definitely wants him dead. Guan thought, is it possible to get missions outside the asylum? And it turns out that you can only open the system in the shelter. He tried to open it and asked why it wouldn't open, but he realized that the mission could be launched anywhere. And 200 bonus points sounds pretty tempting. He only got 100 for the last one, and they're offering him 200. Obviously, this mission is not going to be easy. Wei asked the administrator what exactly did he see there. Guan replied that there was a mutant camp there. Wei was surprised in the moment and very scared. He asked the administrator would they still go there. Guan visualized everything as it could be. And Wei asked him, does he really want to fight them? What if they eat them? Guan replied that if you think about it, they only have one gun. Only one person can fight. Wei also visualized everything and thought that up until this point, he had thought that all the mutants in this game were ordinary NPCs, but now after hearing what the administrator said, the mutants must be their opponents. Guan said that now was not the right time to provoke these things. They needed to prepare better and would focus their efforts on chasing them away and then getting rid of them once and for all. But there were exceptions, for their camp on 76th Street is directly across from the east gate of the park. In any case, they had to be careful. On the way, Guan noticed something and asked, isn't that limestone? At this moment, he was very excited about such a find. He realized that if all that limestone was processed into cement, there would be enough to rebuild 2 buildings. And once Old Man discovers the cement firing technology, there will be no need to worry about raw materials. Upon arriving back, Horsey met the receptionist and said they were already back and asked them what happened. Guan replied that they were mutant hyenas. Their carcasses are quite capable of feeding them for a while. But he had more important news than food, both bad and good. Horse asked, what are the good ones? Guan replied that the good news was that there was an abandoned construction site along the overpass leading out of town. They found a pile of limestone there that appeared to have been desulfurized. They also found a couple of wheelbarrows there that could be used after some minor repairs. Horace got excited and said that was great, but he was so worried that he wouldn't be able to find the raw material for the cement, and he didn't think the problem would be solved so quickly. Tima asked, what's the bad news? Guan replied that there was a mutant camp just east of the park, along 76th Street. He estimated that there were a little more than 20 of them. Wei continued and said that mutants are their enemies. They're strong in battle, and they dine on human flesh. They need to be careful. Guan said that mutants are not something they are able to deal with right now. These guys are clearly not below level 10. Rushing would not only do no good, but also give away their location. Henceforth, all of them are forbidden to approach 76th Street or go beyond the east gate of the park until the threat is removed. Guang further wondered what he should do with the carcasses. He had tasted hyena meat before, but he had bought it from a stall on Bay Street. He himself had not dealt with meat before. For the past 5 months, he has been earning points by gathering resources. He has no particular hunting experience. He had heard that the prey must be exsanguinated at once, otherwise the meat would rot, but it was unclear how to cook it afterwards. Suddenly, Feng asked the Lord if he could give him some of their blood. Guan was surprised and asked why he needed it. Feng replied that he wanted to test some of his hunches. That's what he needed the blood for. Guan cut a piece of hyena and handed it to him. Feng was overjoyed and thanked the administrator for this. In the evening, all the furnaces started running full blast, and the smoke rose more and more into the sky and was visible. Suddenly, Horse went to the administrator and said that thanks to his keen guidance, the furnace was almost ready. Tomorrow, when it dried up, they could start production of the first batch. Guan replied that it was wonderful, and thanks to him, they were one step closer to their goal of revival, and he hopes they will continue to do so. Their contribution is extremely valuable. Horse received encouragements and told the administrator that he had figured it out and it was time for him to get to work. Guan saw that he was becoming more and more skillful at flattery lately, and the other players didn't seem to care too much about it, and they seemed to find joy in their current pursuits. Roughly speaking, a standard survivalist. So it's common to see his home transformed, and he's certainly glad they enjoyed doing it. Their shelter is too poor now. He won't be able to give them anything as a reward. All he can do now is guide them in every way possible. And the situation here is a little clearer. So I decided to see what was going on in the other places. And I discovered the group in front of me. He saw that they left a bunch of reviews and messages. He wondered if these guys were too active online. Sure, it's good to have more and more subscribers, but it seems this guy still believes in fully immersive online games. Guan suddenly looked closely and wondered, had this guy already started to recruit subscriptions? But first, it's worth checking the official forum. And maybe he's there? Guan looked at it and was surprised to say that the post was going to be long. And the last update post attracted a bunch of people. Users with good ideas should be prioritized for the next recruitment. Guan looked at everything and said that now you can reap the benefits of a hard day's work. Next, he opened the system and said he had completed a few missions today, and he saw that he didn't have much in the way of rewards, so he decided he would just open the box. When he opened the drawer, he saw again that there were sweets on the shelf, and it didn't surprise him anymore, because he was used to it. Guan started to get angry and said that the system gave him that's all he got from many missions. But in a moment he saw with the corner of his eye a lollipop that was glowing and asked what was that even. He noticed that this candy looked absolutely amazing. He opened the instructions and saw that the system had finally smiled on him. After all, the candy improves strength by 10% and the duration of the effect is 10 hours. Guan immediately thought, what kind of technology is this? And what is it now, candy, or is it a boost after all? He read everything and realized that it's valid for a whole 10 hours. And 10% to strength does sound good. At a critical moment, it can really turn the tide of battle. So he figured he'd just eat it during the fight. And no matter, he'd save it for a rainy day, because it's always nice to have an ace up your sleeve. In the morning, Horsey said they were back. And now that the materials were gathered, they could begin the kindling. He set to work and said that the first thing to do was to crush the limestone. Then they would mix it with iron filings and clay. And now they're going to heat it to 1,450 degrees in the furnace. Tima picked up the blower and said it would help make the fire stronger. Suddenly he asked, how do you determine the temperature of an oven? Horace turned around and replied that he didn't know. Tima got upset and asked him how dare he say that. Horsey turned around and asked him back, did he have a thermometer lying around somewhere? Stop talking nonsense and get him to do something right away. Get him to turn up the heat and get on with it. Next, Horace asked where he could get a generator. Tima noticed that this guy had been looking more and more like some kind of foreman since he had become head of construction. But turning around, Tima saw that the two assholes had escaped. But by now, Guan had come in and was wondering what they were doing. But on the way, he saw Wei running toward him and shouting. Guan asked them where they were. Feng replied that near the mutant camp. Guan got angry and asked, didn't he tell them not to go there? Feng replied that they didn't go close, they just set traps there. Wei brought a bucket and told the receptionist to take a look. They had gotten baby mutated leeches. Guan looked in the bucket and said mutated leeches, and asked the boys how they caught them. And in fact, he hadn't heard of anyone catching them before. Although mutated insects are rich in protein, they're full of parasites that are impossible to get rid of completely. Wei replied that they used animal blood to lure them into the bottles. Bigger ones wouldn't fit through it, but the little ones were perfect. Feng said they forage for food at night and return to the nest at dawn. Almost all the bottles intact except for a couple. He originally did it as an experiment, but it really worked. Guan told the guys that it wasn't a bad idea. Guan remembered that yesterday he had asked him for meat and blood to bait the leeches. And now he asked the boys what he was going to do with them, but he knows they are inedible. Feng replied that he would like to try using them as fishing bait. Guang asked with surprise for fishing. Feng replied that he was exploring a place near the lake and saw huge blackbirds fishing there. Since there are fish in that lake, they can get food by fishing. Guang imagined all this and realized it was a great idea. He's tried fishing before because it's less risky than hunting, but he's a mediocre fisherman. It is hard to catch fish with a professional rod and tackle, and even more so without them. He is sure that he is not the problem. If fish were so easy to catch, wouldn't the survivors settle near water bodies? All the fish that are in the water now are mutants, too, with a variety of different weights. But that's not the case with leeches as bait. These guys have a paralyzing effect. Guan asked him if he knew how to fish. Feng replied that he didn't, but he planned to make a couple of fishing traps. Guang said okay then. In that case, he would leave it to him. The boys were overjoyed at once and thanked him. Guan thought that since these guys had already gone about their business, it was time to get back to the hyena meat. Yesterday, he had tried cooking it in the way he knew. He had rolled the meat in shredded tobacco leaves and then roasted it over a fire. The resin of the leaves penetrates the fatty layer of the meat and kills parasites and other microorganisms there. Maybe it's just his imagination, but it stinks. Guan immediately said that it shouldn't be like this. Under normal circumstances, meat cooked in this way has a subtle flavor and is slightly shiny on the outside. But his piece was too dark, too damp inside, too rotten. Guan wondered what he had done wrong. Guan threw the meat away and said he definitely wouldn't eat it, and it would be good if they had a refrigerator. He thought about everything and realized that he needed a blue mushroom for the generator. But it was only the second week of September, so he would have to wait for his caravan until the end of the month. But he doesn't have time to think about that right now. He can't, waiting until the end of the month to start stocking up. And such a luxury as a refrigerator, given the current state of their shelter, he can't afford it. For the next 3 days, he would go hunting in the morning. He would return in the afternoon and prepare meat for the players. Then he thought about what they should do with the meat. Let his research on meat harvesting not go well so far, but the good news is that by hunting for the last 3 days, he will be able to get 7 bonus points. Around 10 o'clock, he realized he had already packed everything, so he decided to open the drawer. And luckily, this time it wasn't candy, but a bottle of soy sauce. But of course he doesn't know what kind of company it is, but it will definitely improve the taste of the food. In the evening before the fire, Wei said that he was sick of stew, and he was so excited when he found out you could eat in the game, but now he realizes how useless it is. Wei started yelling that they were constantly stewing everything to a puree. If his mouth could still handle it, his ass was already coping with great difficulty. Hormy replied that they probably didn't fully work out the flavor system because the flavor shouldn't be like that. Tima has already started throwing up and said that meat is not salty, not fresh, just fatty and a little bitter. I'd rather eat wheat. Course picked up the meat with his chopsticks and said the smell was too strong. He would have to use cooking wine, ginger, and garlic to break it up a little. But they're actually in the wasteland. You can't get all here, so let them get over it. They will definitely have delicious food in the future. Tima has noticed that Horsey has become the head of construction. This guy is always stomping on the game developers. He also offers his own ideas. But he's right. Since labeling makes a product exclusive, he wouldn't be surprised if even basic things have to be paid for in the future. Wei said he hopes there will be condiments in the next update. He's willing to splurge on them. But Feng was eating at this time and said that he was thinking about how to improve the trap. Would it be possible to buy it with you on? Wei asked the guy how the firing was going. Horsey replied that the quality needs to be improved, but he feels success is close. Wei looked at him and said he was pure braggadocio. Horsey started to deny it and replied that he meant it. And it's not just the cement. They're trying to make bricks now, except that without a mold it doesn't turn out well, and when fire it looks even worse. Wei asked, couldn't we use wood to make the mold? Tima started laughing and answered him that he thought it was so easy. It's not just chopping wood for him. Mold making is a real, painstaking craftsmanship. Tima realized that he wasn't going to be a master survivalist who builds beautiful buildings in the forest. And now he'd just gotten stuck on such a trivial problem. Tima said it was the harsh wasteland setting that was to blame. Feng looked at him strangely and realized that he was telling the truth after all. All these days, he had been doing research. He had set several traps, but he had never caught anything. And maybe those birds had long ago molested all the fish, and the remaining fish were just devouring his bait and swimming away. Feng pulled out his jar and saw that they had eaten almost all of his leeches. He had very few left, but it doesn't matter anymore. We should try to restore the fish population in the lake and then catch them when they let their guard down. Suddenly, Horsey said that he had heard that new players would be joining them soon. Tima asked in surprise, "Really?" He hoped there would be girls there to lighten the mood. Wei had already visualized everything and said that he thought the person that would join them would be a real beauty. Suddenly, the boys turned around and were very surprised. Then the door opened, and Guan told the boys that he would introduce them to their new comrades. Scrambled eggs and tomatoes and a mosquito in the toilet. The students were shocked and very upset because they were both men. Guan saw all this and thought what idiotic names they had. But he told the others to welcome their newcomers. The guys started clapping their hands and saying, "Here come the new players to their rescue." Overy approached the food and immediately felt that warmth and flavor enveloping the souls. And how realistic it is. Horsey turned to the boys and asked what their characteristics were. Komar replied that he was very agile. But Eggman asked the guys, did his physique bother them? Wei replied that originally the welcoming ceremony was supposed to be formal, but something didn't go according to plan and suggested they eat first. Wei asked the guys they just plugged in, right? Komar picked up a plate and saw that the mush looked like poison. Often in games like this, you can die if you eat the wrong thing, and then you have to wait for resurrection. But this is his first chance to eat in the game. How can he miss it? He still has to try. Komar picked up the plate and realized that he was definitely going to do it. After this, he started yelling that the taste was just disgusting. How can a game feed them this? Tima told him that if he didn't eat, he would get hypoglycemia. But he didn't think the food in the game would be like that. His imagination was different. How would a girl date him and ask him what he would have for dinner? Tima will reply to her that there is usually a hottie in the game who is willing to feed him delicious food. Eggman looked at the food and said, "What the heck is this muddy stuff?" Horsey answered him that it was meat. The boy asked in surprise, "Meat? But it can't be." Horsey said it was a mutated hyena, though they're not entirely sure if it was a dog or a wolf. It's definitely a mutant. The Overy tasted it and said the food had a rotten smell. Didn't they bleed them? Tima replied to the guy that he didn't know, and that's what NPC brought them. Horsey at this point told Eggman that if he's good at cooking, he should discuss it with the admin. They all have useful skills. Eggman asked, didn't he? Then he would love to try it. Komar also joined the conversation and asked if they needed carpenters. He's good at that. Horsey asked with surprise, a carpenter? Is he a real carpenter? Komar replied that yes, he is. His family is in the business of making handmade furniture. If he's interested, he can sign up for their account, and they'll give him a discount. Tima and Horsey hugged him from both sides and told him they needed someone to make molds for him. They dragged him away immediately and didn't even give him a chance. But Komar shouted at them to leave him because he hadn't finished yet. Horsey told him he'd finish it later. What's so hard about asking for another portion later? Tima also said it's right, and let him listen. It's not even very tasty, and now they will show him how to play the game. Overy was shocked at what he saw and asked, "Is this game hard?" Wei replied that it's fine, and it's not that hard. Wei said that in any case, there's no special content to look forward to for now, right? Overy didn't realize if these were all the answers, but it took a lot of effort for him to get to the closed testing. First, you have to look around. Komar got to work and told the guys that they were completely unskilled with wood. Just let them see. It was already getting moldy. Horsey remarked that this Komar was indeed a skillful carpenter. Komar did everything and asked if it was enough. Horse replied that it was more than enough, and they're grateful to him for helping them so much. Komar said that it was not necessary to thank him. If he needs anything, just let him know. Horse replied that, well, he will remember, and would be glad to work with him in the future. And after that, they immediately set to work making bricks. Soon Horse looked at it and said that it was much better than the old one. Tima asked if it was working. Horsey answered him to be sure. No room for questions here. One must do, and they will see everything at the end. After the work was done, Horsey said they should be on their way, and they could leave the furnace to burn itself in peace. As for the new furnace, he feels like they are on the verge of a breakthrough. Gotta get good and get as much done as possible before they go off the grid. Guan noticed that, as he expected, these guys were working harder and harder, and the newcomers were not idle. At this time, Wei was shocked by what he saw and told his brother that it was awesome. And thanks to him, his fish trap is ready. Komar said he decided to redesign the traditional shape of the trap a bit. He also replaced the weak wooden slats with metal to make the basic structure stronger. Wei replied to the guy that thanks to his improved trap, no more fish would escape them. Wei and the boys went to the lake to go fishing. Guan noticed that these guys were really good. He shouldn't sit idle either. We have to go back to cooking hyena meat. Suddenly, Eggman walked up to the receptionist and asked what he was doing here. Guan thought that if he understood correctly, this guy is a certified chief. Guan replied to the guy that he was trying to think of a way to cook the meat. And he's just in time. He's appointed as the cook of outpost number 404 from now on. And the situation they now face is very serious. In addition to building, they need to prepare food for the hundreds of comrades who will be arriving with them before winter sets in. And now Ovary just had to help him. Eggman remembered everything and realized that he was indeed a chef. He had already had to cook a couple of times for his fellow chefs, and he didn't even expect that he would have to do cooking in the game too. Can't he even change his profession in the game? Ovary asked, what can he do to help? Guan replied, that was a good question. He tried storing meat, but failed. He needs him to solve a food storage problem. He read his file. It says he has relevant experience, right? Eggman replied that he has a little bit of knowledge, but after all, it's a game. What he means to say is that he is not sure if his experience will be useful in the game. Guan said it was fine, and he just wanted his professional advice on whether he could help, what was wrong with the recipe he was trying to replicate. Ovary thought instead of saying exactly what he did wrong. It's easier for him to say what he did right. Eggman said that, for one thing, smoking meat needs to be done indoors. His method is not suitable for that. Is this meat flavored with something, the guy asked? Guan replied that with tobacco leaves. Ovary was shocked and asked again, with tobacco leaves? Guan said that this is a very rare resource. Survivors use these leaves, which are rich in fragrance and special resin. Instead of table salt, they pulverize it and add it to foods. When heated, the flavor of the leaf mixes with the fat of the meat and creates a preserving effect. Ovary thought, is that possible? Some compounds really can be used as food preservatives. But this is the first time he's ever heard of food being cooked this way. Eggman said you can smoke meat without salt, but the flavor will be bad. But he doesn't understand at all how the method he described works, but food cooked in this way is unlikely to be healthy. Guan was in shock at this point and didn't even know that it was possible to do without salt in this way. Ovary said that microorganisms need moisture to survive. In the smoking process, the moisture comes out of the month, dehydrating it. And with salt, it will be much better. It will store better and taste much better. But if you do it right, you could do without salt. And of course, if the meat is fatty, it will be more difficult to process it, but it all depends on the type of meat. But no matter how things worked out, they couldn't get it canned, it wouldn't work. Guan thought that if they could find a way to procure food, it would be a real gold mine for them. However, no matter how squirrely these guys were, they still managed to survive up to this point. Guan told the guy that he was counting on him then, and as he left he realized that another problem was solved. He realized that since the food problem was solved, should he bring in more players to increase productivity? But only with the help of laborers will he be able to finish the planned construction by the end of the month. Suddenly, out of the blue, he heard Horsey yelling that they had finally made it. So he asked the receptionist to take a look too. Guan looked at it and was shocked. Horse and Tima were happy and said that they had made silicate cement. Since it was a test batch, they didn't make very much. Horse said that judging by the volume of the furnace filling opening, it would not be difficult to make half a ton a day. Even though the quality is far from what is made in production shops, it can still be used. And to accelerate the temperature of the furnace to 1,450 degrees, they had to work well with their hands they had to throw up coal shovel by shovel. They can't feel their hands anymore. Guan told the boys that they did a great job. This cement is a huge step in their development. They will remember this. They will each get 1,000 contribution points. The guys got excited and started yelling that this was awesome in general, and their hard work really did pay off. Guang remembered that he had recently given them a lot of currency. This could lead to inflation and affect their gaming life. And it's a great option to reduce the amount of currency in their hands. How about introducing Gassiapon for 1,000 contribution points per attempt? Suddenly, Tima told the administrator that he had something to tell him. Guan replied that he was listening. Tima said that since they were able to create cement, they could use the manpower to start building the outpost. Guan asked how many men he would need. Horsey replied that he would need at least 10. In general, the more the better. Their furnace is completely manually operated, so they will need at least 2 people to work in shifts. Soon they will be building a second furnace, so they will need 4 people. For the transportation of building materials from the construction company requires at least 4 people. The rest will build houses, so you need at least 8 more people. Guan calculated that they needed at least 16 people. The food they had would only last for a week, and that was only enough to feed 7 people, including him. If their numbers double, he doesn't know if they can pull it off. It's already the 9th. Almost a third of September has passed. If they don't work harder, they will definitely not finish the construction before winter. Guan said, well, he heard them. Guan said he would call for support. In 3 days, I'll send a group of newcomers to join them. Have them join them. Horsey was pleased. And with new people, it would be much easier to realize their plans. And he would keep an eye on them. Tima also realized that everything was exactly as he had assumed. As expected, the authority of this NPC is no joke at all. He is able to influence closed testing. Tima thought it looked like the setting of early online games. It's like a huge computing machine. All the content inside the game is dynamic and generated by artificial intelligence. And sure enough, you must be sweating just the same. In the evening, Komar suddenly started shouting that he had done it. A wooden toilet from a tree stump, with an uncut end. Overy says it's cool, and he finally doesn't have to do it while squatting. He almost lost his legs. But suddenly, Feng started running towards them and shouted that he was apologizing but couldn't hold on any longer. Komar replied to him that he was just in time. The wooden VIP toilet is at his service. Feng remembered and realized that this toilet was a public toilet. Other people will use it too, right? It's so unhygienic that he can't accept it. Feng immediately turned around and went into the bushes and said that he would rather squat than sit on this toilet. Eggman realized that this was just a trip to the bathroom for him in the game. But by this point, Wei was starting to shout to him that they had made it. The Overy was shocked when he saw it, and even lost the power of speech at what he saw. After all, they had caught a fish. Wei told them to come over to him soon. Eggman asked, what the fuck is that thing? Wei replied to see what they had caught, and threw out a big fish right in front of the guy. Wei said 3 days. 3 whole days, they finally managed to catch something at least. Feng asked, did he really handle the mutant catfish by himself? Wei asked him back, wasn't he the one who hopped to the bathroom? Couldn't you have gone to the bushes there? Feng replied that he apologized. He didn't mean to. Eggman said he had only caught 1 fish in 3 days of absence. And why was it dead? Wei got angry and swooped down on him and asked, isn't that enough? And he's complaining about the quality too? 3 whole days. Does he have any idea how they spent those 3 days? They sat by the pond for 3 whole nights. Their legs were nearly worn out. Wei asked his friend if the new trap would work. Feng replied that he should stop talking. Suddenly, they noticed that the rope began to slip. They thought it was strange and ran to catch it. Wei asked at once, who's the big guy? He bent the traps, and they saw that they had caught a fish. Feng told him to hurry up and help him get it. But Wei stopped him and replied that he had a bad feeling about it. Wei shouted at Feng to dodge. The guy didn't have time to react, and he had to throw himself at him and knock him down. Looking up, Wei said that those birds were hunting it too. And as soon as the birds flew away, they quickly pulled out the fish. But this fish was surprisingly strong. They had to calm it down so that the birds wouldn't catch it. They killed the fish and then brought it here. Wei asked his brother if he thought it was edible. Edgar realized that he had been cooking most of his life, but this was the first time he had seen such a huge catfish. And she looks at least 100 pounds. The head alone is the size of a trough. Wei asked if they should smoke it. Overy was surprised and replied that no one would ever think of smoking catfish. The fish is too fatty and slimy. It's too much trouble. He's not sure it would work, of course. Feng asked, and what should they do? Eggman replied that it was worth at least trying for starters. He realized that such a huge carcass would definitely crush the smokehouse. Eggman wouldn't tell them everything, and after much deliberation, only this dish came to his mind. Catfish head soup. Since they don't have tofu, nor do they have cooking wine, ginger, and garlic, he couldn't get rid of the fishy smell entirely. He used salt and soy sauce, and that was it. Wei took a plate and felt that it smelled okay, but they didn't talk about the taste, and all of them tasted it together. After a few minutes, he started shouting that it was delicious, and finally a normal meal. It was already 6 in the evening in Wasteland, 6 in the morning in the real world, and the players must be offline by now. So Guan decided to sit down and recruit a couple newbies for them. In fact, we need the new guys to finish the shelter as soon as possible. And when he opened the computer, he saw that there were 30 participants. Guan said that, as expected, once the news of the new recruitment appeared, the forum revitalized. Guan looked at the entire list of contestants and began to think about who to choose. And in a moment, he saw that a couple more newcomers had arrived after the update. He asked where do they all come from anyway. There's not that much online on the forum. He thought there must be a second account. But then he thought about it and came to the conclusion that it couldn't be. It was impossible on the official website. Changing IP address will not help either. The system selects applications very qualitatively, and he should look at the official forum. There are probably more newcomers there. But in the moment, he saw one of the contestants start writing lies and gaslighting everyone. Guan thought, what's wrong with this guy? Maybe he should quit smoking. The forum, after a long time, finally became active, and he immediately started quenching them. And this is definitely not an isolated incident. Guan saw that by poking around the forum, he had roughly figured out where so many new users were coming from. He noticed that someone had taken a screenshot from the official forum chat to other groups. Then the Wasteland, which had only an official website, gained popularity in various circles. Many new users were just messing around, and only a few were discussing the ins and outs of the game. He wondered if he should hire a couple of moderators. Seeing the negativity in the communication, he realized that the forum is still quite lively today. He even wondered what issues they were discussing. Suddenly, he saw someone addressed him by name. Guan noticed this and wondered, who was that under the nickname of the distant future? It turned out to be Tima. He said he was confused about something, so he decided to ask if the NPC admin was a real person or an AI. Guan replied that it's fine, it's not confidential information. People in a petty position like him don't have access to his information. Tima saw all the answers to his questions and saw that Guan wrote that he was special. And this NPC is not that simple. Guan continued that it represents the first generation of full-fledged artificial intelligence developed by their company. Tima was shocked to see that he had been texted that it was a full-fledged too. It may be beyond his knowledge, but how cool is that? Guan even believed himself to be as close to human as possible. He has his own personality, memory, way of thinking, value system, and demeanor. That's why they made him the leader of the players. Tima said it was like that, and he was right after all. And what a genius he is. He realized, not surprisingly, that his decisions affect testing. He noticed that the lore of the game is pretty well designed. It's really like he's in the real world. And even a picky person like him will not be able to find bugs in the game. The only drawback is the insufficient number of NPC. And then he figured out that the likelihood that the test was not related to the game itself, but to 2. Even winter is close, which will appear in the new Alpha 2. 0 update. Designed for that, he's right, isn't he? Tima thought he was a genius at this point, and always sees the true essence. He's figured out what the developers are up to. The guys on the forum are wondering why the company decided to release a new patch during closed testing, but all their speculations for it are too superficial to be true. Guan chatted with him for a few more hours and noticed that this guy is really talented, and his ramblings sound pretty convincing. Tima saw that he was getting things going. He didn't answer for quite a while, as he had actually intended. Guan started to write to him that he was right about everything, and there's no deception here. The distant future makes sense to be in this chat room. Guan saw that Tima had gone over the edge and wondered if he should have strutted around like that. This would be a lesson to him, and either way, he needs some good players. His next move is to bring in new recruits. In the morning, Guan gathered everyone and said that the leaves were turning yellow, the temperature was dropping, and a crisis was just around the corner. This year's winter will be much harsher than the previous one, and it will come earlier, so there is not much time left for preparation. From now on, they must use every minute to prepare. They need to do it before it's too late. The mission panel has been updated. It lists the list of essentials, objects to be completed, and a list of rewards. And let them remember that only together they can overcome difficulties. Winter is very close. This is a real test for all of them. Faced with the enthusiastic gaze of the players, he gave a speech full of passion. He officially launched the first edition of closed testing winter clothes. With the opening of the new chapter, the atmosphere both in the game and on the forum has changed a lot. It's not just the players. There is something about this cool air. The supplies they had were not very generous to begin with. The population would grow from 6 to 30, that is 5 times. And to feed the 30 mouths about to arrive, he was busy from morning until late at night. Wei was particularly agile, hunting so they could stockpile as much food as possible. Fortunately, the results were very encouraging. In 3 days, they had killed more than 10 mutant hyenas, and countless hares and squirrels had fallen into their traps. They're mutants too, but they're still edible. In addition, Wei, in charge of guarding and searching for enemies, was finally able to Anna the first level. At this moment, Wei himself was shocked and shouted that he was able to improve his level. One also actually felt that a breakthrough was just around the corner. But pumping administrators has its own peculiarities. In fact, he still hadn't figured out the secrets of the enhancement, so he only had to rely on the inspection equipment. Progress did increase slightly. On the other hand, the other players had quite remarkable skills, which helped them improve faster. The kids used charcoal as the main raw material for the furnace. They were able to extract slag from iron-containing waste like rusty rods and automobile parts. They added this slag to the kiln and mixed it with limestone. This way they were able to achieve a stronger formula. Of course, he realized that it was hard work. Working with the furnace, hauling materials on carts, it all requires a lot of physical effort. But it was because of the physical exertion that Hor was able to upgrade to level 2. His characteristics also increased. As for Tim, who was working with him, he managed to make it to the first level. His strength hadn't increased much, but his dexterity was pretty good. Characterization pumping is very different from genetic pumping on a use-it-or-lose-it basis. But one comrade of theirs is perhaps the saddest example. Among the 4 players, he is probably the only one who has never been able to rise above the 0 level. He's caught a lot of fish these days with his improved trap, but he still lacks the points to raise. The experience points you get for hunting with traps are not as great as those you can get in direct combat. It bothers him a lot, but unfortunately, there is no solution yet. The new players are also very motivated. They have been working tirelessly these past few days. For example, the mosquito. He continues to improve his carpentry skills, and from time to time, he helps the kids fix something or create a new trap. On top of that, he has a mission of his own. It looks like he's going to build a simple wooden house to use as a warehouse and laboratory. These days, he managed to collect quite a few different vials, which he displayed near the cabin. Letting Guan doubt the safety of this construction, looking at how much he liked this matter, he decided not to interfere. Compared to him, Eggman really stands out a lot. He is not only responsible for preparing the food, but also helps the administrator. His main struggle, the fight against smoking. Since salt is a real luxury at the outpost, he has to resort to other methods. He has to use the most primitive method of smoking. Wouldn't that be the case? He hangs the meat and shoves it into a small stove made of clay and bricks. He uses charcoal for smokiness, slowly cooks the meat on the fire, drying out the moisture, close the hole with pine branches beforehand. This meat is very similar to dried meat. It can be stored even without salt. When winter comes, it can be wrapped in cellophane or bark and buried in snow, so that it can be stored until next spring. But what he cooked in a similar way tastes very hard. And in addition to meat, he also uses hides to cultivate them. Tanning is a complicated and tedious process, far more troublesome than making jerky. But right now, they don't need perfect processing. They need something that protects them from the cold. In short, they don't care about quality, so they skip some processes. After work, Horse has a lot of potash water left over, which he stores in plastic barrels. Brother Eggman uses it to tan the leather he takes off the animals and washes well beforehand. After impregnation, he stretches the leather to dry, so he gets a piece of leather of pretty good quality. Suddenly one day, Eggman walked up to the receptionist and said he couldn't take it anymore. He needs at least one pair of hands to help him. Overy noticed right away, because this guy is lazy. He pretends to help the administrator with the loot, but he's really just lazing around. And why shouldn't he help him? Wei answered the guy not to look at him like that. He was very busy too. Wei didn't want to get involved because he wouldn't be able to find any more NPC with which he could pump so fast. And he didn't give up his cooking. Overy was very angry after these words and tried to restrain himself. Guang told the cook that Wei was helping him with the search for prey. He really needs his skills to stay out of trouble. He can't give him up, but he promises that he will solve his problem soon. The new guys are on their way. They will be here soon. Overy replied that he was grateful. That really would be great. And he said that no matter how hard he tried, he could only do basic leatherworking. But how make clothes out of it? He has no idea. Guan told him not to worry about it. There was someone among the newcomers who would be able to help them with this. He would have that person take care of making the clothes. Guan realized that they would have more than just a tailor. Among the new testing players, there are talents in various fields. Even though not all of them are professionals, there are students among them, but they will be useful in any case. But anyway, the internet is a thing. It has big bets on energetic newbies. If they work hard enough, sooner or later he'll build himself a huge house. That's great. On planet Earth in the evening, a guy lay in bed saying that the day of the server opening had finally arrived. These 3 days have been so tiring. Guan told them to follow the instructions on the website, have them put on a helmet, lie on the bed, and close their eyes. A player named Knife Thrower, saving others, asked, "Is this really it?" Opening his eyes abruptly, he saw a bright light. Immediately, he woke up in another world. Thrower thought, "Is this a game world?" He has these sensations so realistic that he can feel that cold. "And what is that strange odor?" he asked. But raising his head in front of him, he saw a large mutant and said it stank. The mutant couldn't answer him and just showed his teeth at the end. Thrower was scared and almost peed his pants. He started screaming and asking what was that. The mutant started talking to him and asked the guy who he just called him. The Thrower asked him who he was. Was he an NPC? The mutant replied to the guy that he was wrong. He's a player. His ID is a level 99 garbage collector. You should be the one to ask him how he got here and who he is, anyway. The Knife Thrower started laughing and asked back in surprise that he was the garbage collector. He had joined them a couple days ago, after all. Why is he so scary? The garbage collector replied that he was scary himself. But suddenly he looked under his feet and began to whirl around. The picker started to panic and asked where his gear had gone. The Thrower replied that with the way he looked, was that the only thing he cared about? The picker started screaming that his gear had been stolen. He'd been tricked. Why didn't he become a sexy lizard? The Thrower told him that if he didn't want to be a lizard, they could switch. The Gatherer got angry and told him to make him disappear. The Assembler looked at his capsule and said that the official website says that the sleep capsule connects to a body scanning device and that you can see your own performance. He found where his characteristics were and was completely shocked. He started asking why he had such characteristics. He actually remembers that the website wrote that the minimum adult male reading is 5 deviations plus or minus 2. And now he's a grown man. Except for the low intelligence score, the rest are extremely good. But to be honest, he doesn't think he's a smart guy himself. He may not have a very high IQ, but that's no problem. It doesn't bother him at all. The knife thrower asked him if he was okay. The picker replied that everything was cool and suggested the guy to get out of this room. They need to meet other players. No need to keep the admin waiting. Gatherer headed for the door with a confident gait. But Thrower suddenly saw that there was paper on his ass. He immediately felt uncomfortable. The Thrower told him that he had something stuck in his ass. The picker blushed and asked where. The picker pulled a piece of paper out of his ass, and upon looking realized it wasn't just a piece of paper, but something waterproof. He looked at the paper and saw strange writing. He immediately thought, what does it even say? As they left the room, they ran into the other players. The participants immediately turned around and saw them. Their facial expressions were very interesting, as if they were in shock. But they loved it and started yelling that it was a lizard man. They immediately started asking if they could pick a race too. This is just too much. The participants immediately surrounded it and decided to take a closer look. Could this be a hidden achievement? The thrower told the lizard that he didn't think he would be so popular. The gatherer hugged him and with stinky breath answered him not to get upset. He would protect him. Thrower couldn't take his breath odor and slapped him in the face, telling him to move away from him. The stench of that lizard was unbearable. And other than this guy, all the other players are normal people. Judging by their physiques, they all have roughly the same basic stats, including strength, agility, and intelligence. Thrower looked around and suddenly saw two beautiful girls standing in the corner. His face immediately changed, and his heart began to beat even faster. All the guys surrounded them and were surprised to see that they were actually girls. And there seems to be some kind of conflict. There was an argument between them at this point. Waisoka asked the other one if she was too small for it, and in the end she called her a booger. The youngest couldn't help herself after such insults and hit her from the head, saying she was a chubby girl. She's the only thing that makes her good at being tall. 10 minutes earlier, a Girl Scout player named Tan had said that this was the game. She couldn't believe that she had moved into the game. Tan said it feels too realistic, and she can't wait to try out the transformation they wrote about on the website. She looked around the area and thought that there were probably several pods here and should check all of them. Walking out the door, she was shocked at what she saw. The room was filled with players. She thought that girl gamers are not often seen, and when she saw her in the crowd, she thought she was so tall, and she's exactly 6 feet tall. Tan approached her respectfully and greeted her, but the girl was shocked and just looked at her with an arrogant look. Tan told her that she saw her standing here alone, and it looks like they're the only girls here. Tan was very friendly and offered to introduce herself to her, but first she introduced herself. The girl was also very pleased to see women here besides her. She immediately introduced herself and said her name was Yi. Tan became a little uncomfortable and her face changed dramatically. I asked her what was wrong. Tan looked and replied that they were all dressed the same. Indeed, it must be newcomers' clothes or something. She thought about it and said it wasn't that simple. From her experience of sewing clothes, she could say with certainty that the material here was unusual. And it looks like this material protects against the cold and wind. This fabric is far more perfect than anything she's ever had to work with. Looking at the other part of the garment, she noticed that the material was different there. And was it done intentionally, she thought? She suddenly pulled on a strap of clothing and immediately had a new and improved costume. I saw it and asked, what are those devices on the clothes? Tung blushed at this moment because her whole body was in tight clothes. I couldn't help it and let the tears flow and started laughing. But Tin didn't like it and started to get angry. She realized that this girl must be making fun of her breasts. She hates it when people make fun of the size of her breasts. Tin asked her why she was laughing. She's got tits like a cow. She's got tits and no brains. It's just a stupid notch. I told her she didn't even have a hint of breasts. Where'd it go? Did it go in her ass? I looked at her and told her she didn't have an ass either. And she's just a poor kid. I found the same rope on her clothes and pulled too. Her clothes immediately changed and became tight. I said she was proud of her big breasts. You haven't let the little tits have a say in this yet. They started fighting and calling each other names. On the one hand, I said that's all she had the imagination for. And she's in elementary school? Tan replied that she's actually the director of a fashion design agency. and she could at least be useful in this game. I couldn't help myself and started laughing at her saying she was a director. And I asked her what her company was called. Tam replied that it was none of her business. Thrower looked at everyone and felt like he was in a madhouse. But suddenly, Guan came in and told everyone to shut up immediately. The participants turned around and were overjoyed to see the NPC. Thrower got very excited too, for he realized that this was the opening scene, and it must be Administrator. And even though it's his first time playing, he's been following the news on the official site for a long time, so he's familiar with the lore. He remembered that today was the third day of closed testing. They didn't need a lot of coal for the furnaces. They had managed to optimize production and make a bigger furnace. And if everything went well tomorrow, they would be supplied with building material. Guan met them and told them that they had arrived at the shelter number 404. And there's an administrator standing in front of them, and the code name is Dawn. Guan decided to tell all the rules, but suddenly looking at all the newcomers, he saw the gatherer and froze in a moment. He thought, what is this even? He thought, why is a member of another race here? But judging by the stupid expression on his face, it must be a player. And then he has nothing to worry about. He's afraid of those that might be lurking in the shadows, but this guy's not one of them. And it only takes him a few seconds to kick one of them out. But what can they do in that time? He decided he would deal with this lizard later, and it was time to get back to the story. Guan said he had to give them the good news. The war was over. But the bad news is that their world has changed beyond recognition. If they plan to pack up and go home, he'll tell them right away that it's impossible. After all, it is now the 200th year since the end of the world began, but thankfully the hardest years are behind us. And they are very fortunate to be more fortunate than the 12 billion. He needs them to realize the situation they are in as soon as possible. Guan showed the projection and said they had a great mission in front of them to rebuild their home. And that creature beside him is Xiao's assistant. If they have any questions, they can ask him. Guan remembered that this was a standard opening statement, and he had said it before. When the next batch of players arrived, he would simply repeat it again if no bugs or errors popped up. Guan said that in addition, the Shelter Resident Handbook has been updated to version 2.0. It includes rules, public order requirements, and prohibitions. And he advises them to reread it from time to time. Residents who violate the rules will be placed in jail. If the offense is more serious, they will be expelled and banned. And he hopes that doesn't happen. Iya and everyone else were greatly surprised. She wondered if this NPC had too much power. Guan realized that since they had gotten into testing, they had familiarized themselves with the rules. Besides, the rules weren't very strict. They mostly involved skirmishes between players and harassment of other players. Restrictions were placed on malicious sabotage and destruction of game objects. Most normal players would find these rules reasonable. Some of the points he drew from the players' own discussions just added a little. Their ideas were pretty good, especially for sandbox games. For example, players should not be allowed to destroy the work of other players. As he said earlier, he not only accepted their suggestions, but complimented them. For example, malicious damage to objects would be punishable by forced labor, which would be unpaid. Pretty clever. After explaining the details, he left the shelter with 24 players and took the elevator to the surface. Gatherer asked, "Is this really a game world?" The thrower also looked around and replied that it was just cool. The other students started saying it's fucking amazing here. They are shocked and can't believe it. Guan looked at them at this moment, and he wanted to tell them that they were rejoicing early. He then introduced the players to the main facilities of the outpost, especially emphasizing that defecation is not allowed near the outpost. He then handed them over to Horsa and his friends who had been waiting for them. A construction site is a place where people are always needed. There is no need to worry about not having a job for someone. Veteran players will show them what they need to do. Some are made to carry bricks and build walls. Others were taken to the site to carry various raw materials for cement. And for each hour of work, they received 10 contribution points. Although they don't know what these points are for yet, they're very motivated. So without wasting time, they all started working. Of course, not everyone did the building. It is not the only way to build a house, but it is the only way to build a house. For example, The player with ID Car has been assigned as a picker. She belongs to the perception system. Let her base stats be slightly lower than Wei's. But her perception score is 6, but she has the basic talent of toxin intuition. These players can sense poisons on an instinctual level without any special knowledge. And with the development of immunity, the effects of poisons on the body will be reduced. In addition, the perception score increases the effectiveness of this talent. She's just the perfect gatherer. In addition, they have a lizard man. Guan asked him, is he the level 99 garbage collector? But realized that some strange name he had. The lizard replied that that was right. It was him. He immediately thought, is this piece of paper a hidden mission? The lizard told Mr. Administrator that he found this note after waking up, but he couldn't make anything out. Can he tell me what it even says? Guan was shocked by the smell the moment he was near him and taking the paper looked at it. He noticed that the paper was a little damp, as if it had been lying in water, but it was not permanently soaked, as if it were made of a special material. Guan looked closer and noticed that it looked familiar. It was written in the language of this world. He asked the gatherer where he got it. The picker didn't hesitate and replied that he pulled it out of his ass. Guan immediately felt sick after hearing this. The picker saw the look and said he meant he noticed it stuck there when he woke up. Guan replied that it was fine, he was just asking. He used his translation gaze and thought that this guy must be crazy. Never mind, you can't speak ill of a dead man. So I decided to see what talents he had. And when I opened up the profile, I was shocked. Guan saw that his strength and physique were incredible. He would easily overtake him with his level 5 strength. And regeneration and coolness, very practical talents. Even though it has debuffs like slow pumping, they are not critical flaws. And that won't be a problem. Guang told him that from that day forward, they would hunt together. The collector, hearing these words, became very excited and said that he would gladly serve Mr. Administrator. Guan answered him that it was very good and greatly impressive, and ordered him to go away and wait. After all, there was something to be dealt with, and he would join him soon. The gatherer obeyed the order and stepped aside. But suddenly Tang came up to him and turned to him. Guan looked and was shocked and immediately noticed her clothes. He wondered immediately, why did he and Car have such tight-fitting clothes? He hadn't noticed that before.